Let me start by saying I know how this sounds. Three college guys, at the end of the semester, a rural VRBO, and a storm warning, feels like the setup to every backwoods horror cliché tilde copyright imaginable. Believe me, I get it. We were exactly the kind of idiots who would ignore red flags if it meant cheaper booze and no neighbors for 20 miles. And that's what we go to a bargain. The listing called it a reinforced storm shelter home, tucked away in West Texas Scrubland, far enough from Lubbock to lose signal, but close enough for a beer run if needed. No reviews, not one, but the photos were glossy and professionally staged. A sunset over a wraparound porch, a slick minimalist kitchen, even a hot tub on the deck. The best part, 2 nights for $129 total. I booked it, split 3 ways. It was cheaper than a bar tab. Trevor thought it was hilarious. He said it looked like a murder barn from the outside. Jared called it off-grid aesthetic and brought 4 bottles of Fireball to celebrate the end of finals. None of us were particularly concerned about the lack of internet or a cell phone signal. Trevor joked, "No girls, no Wi-Fi. I guess we're really roughing it this weekend, boys." I remember the message from the owner more clearly now. It didn't seem strange at the time. He thanked us for booking, noted that the low rate was due to it being storm season, and added, "No worries, gentlemen, the structure's reinforced steel-bolted framing, thermal shielding, industrial roofing. She's held through worse. Just don't ignore the alerts. And don't turn off the intercom. Whatever you do, it exists for your safety." There was a smiley face at the end of the message. I remember that, too. We arrived just before sunset. The GPS cut out 5 miles from the property, and we had to finish the drive using screenshots of the directions. When we turned off the main road, the gravel drive narrowed into a patchy, rutted mess that wound past empty fields and a rusted-out grain silo. Then the house came into view. It didn't quite match the listing photos. It was the same house, yes, but it looked more a broken bar armored. The porch columns were metal, not wood, as in the listing. The windows were covered by heavy-duty retractable shutters, currently open. The walls were paneled with some sort of galvanized sheet siding, bolted down tight. Even the foundation had thick steel plates set around the base, like a protective coating. "Damn," Jared muttered. "Looks like they're prepping for war, not weather." "Bet it was a meth house before they cleaned it up," Trevant said, already pulling out his phone for pictures. Inside, it smelled faintly of bleach and rust. The layout matched the listing: a open floor plan, updated kitchen, 2 bedrooms, plus a finished attic with a few bunk beds. But there were broken bar details that didn't sit right. Little things, like the scratch marks in the hallway drywall. They weren't from claws, they were more like shallow gouges, curved like bites. We noticed similar indentations on the door frames, both inside and out. A few looked as if they'd been painted over, poorly. Then there was the black crust in the corners, not mold exactly, too dry and granular. It was concentrated in the crevices where the floor met the walls, or in the seams around the window frames. "Maybe mice," I offered. Trevor knelt beside one patch. "Mice with fangs and black tar for blood?" We laughed it off. We were 21 and drunk within the hour. The intercom was built into the wall beside the fridge, a square speaker grill with a green light blinking softly. An old-looking label had been taped next to it. "Storm alert system A, do not disable. Weather warnings will be broadcast throughout the property. Alerts are not optional." Underneath, someone had scribbled in pen, "Don't turn me off, not even for a second." Jared saluted it with his shot glass. "I, for one, welcome our new weather robot overlord." The intercom buzzed briefly an hour later. Just static, followed by a single low tone. We stood there, frozen, looking at each other, but nothing else happened. Trevant smirked. "Guess Siri's checking in." By midnight, we'd half forgotten it. The drinks kept coming, and someone dug out a Bluetooth speaker. We were playing beer pong on the island counter when the tone returned. "BZZZZZZT." Then a crisp, monotone female voice came through. "Tornado warning. Carnivorous system detected. Take shelter. Do not exit structure. Do not open doors." It didn't sound like a storm center broadcast. It didn't sound like a person, either. more like something trained to imitate one. Jared snorted. Did it just say carnivorous? Trevon doubled over laughing. Damn, that's metal. Cannibal cyclone. I didn't laugh. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. It was hard to explain. Still, I figured it was a weird local thing. Maybe someone had hacked the system as a prank. 10 minutes later, we heard the first howl. It sounded like something huge and wounded, bellowing through miles of empty land. The windows shuddered in their frames. The metal siding groaned. The power stayed on, but the porch light flickered once. Trevon went for the front door. I need to see this. If it's an honest-to-God flesh tornado, you all know I'm getting that on camera. I stopped him. Dude, it could just be a normal tornado, with a creepy alert system. He laughed. Then I want proof for TikTok. The wind howled again. It was closer this time. I shuddered involuntarily. We argued for a minute before Trevon stepped out onto the porch. Phone up. Recording. I hovered behind him, just outside the threshold. The clouds above us churned like liquid slate, and from them, something descended. It wasn't an ordinary funnel cloud. It was pinkish-gray, fibrous, and wet. It didn't twist or rotate so much as ripple like muscle under skin. If I didn't know better, I would have said it looked like it was made out of actual flesh. Lightning flashed inside it, but instead of thunder, we heard something that made my stomach twist. Screaming. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. Trevon's phone dropped from his hand. All around us, the air filled with a new sound, a dry, sharp rattle, like sand hitting metal, only it wasn't sand, it was teeth. Thousands of them, spinning like shrapnel, glinting in the porch light as they peppered the siding, ground, and railing. One yellow, human-sized specimen buried itself in the wood next to my hand. Trevon screamed, spinning around. His face was cut open, cheek split to the bone. More teeth jutted out from his shoulder and leg, with one lodged just above his eye socket. He staggered, slipped, and fell against the door frame. I grabbed him and dragged him back inside. Teeth clinked off the walls as we slammed the door shut. Blood dripped in fat splats onto the laminate floor. One of the embedded teeth twitched, then burrowed deeper into Trevon's thigh. He screamed again, slapping at it. Jared ran in with towels, white-faced and shaking. WHWH, what's happening? The intercom buzzed once more, followed by the same calm voice. Severe wind event in progress. Do not exit structure. High likelihood of casualties. Shelter advised. I looked back at the post-it note. Don't turn me off. Not even for a second. And for the first time, I intended to follow the instructions. Trevon spent the next 10 minutes convulsing on the floor while we tried to dig the teeth out of his leg with a butter knife and barbecue tongs. It wasn't just blood. The wounds wept something thicker, almost like tar. And the teeth a broken bar. They weren't just stuck in him. They were working, writhing, as if chewing. Every time we gripped one, it squirmed beneath the skin, burrowing deeper into the flesh, as if it knew. I'll never forget the one in his face. It had lodged above his eye, in the soft meat under the brow. At first, Trevon was shouting, screaming, then his voice pitched high and thin, and he just clawed at it. His fingernails broke as he frantically tried to dig it out. I pinned his arms. Jared hesitated, his face ghost pale and glistening with sweat before jerking the tooth out with the tongs. Trevon's eyeball came with it, with a burst of fluid. I remember thinking it resembled egg whites. Trevon fainted, and Jared dropped the tooth. It fell to the floor and twitched like a cockroach, then split in half and began to crumble. I wrapped Trevon's head in a kitchen towel and laid him out on the couch, while Jared dry heaved into the sink. Outside, the storm didn't fade. It circled and intensified. The lights flickered again. Wind hammered the walls with what sounded like sledgehammers made of flesh. And beneath it all, we could still hear the howling, the rising and falling, harmonizing with itself in a sick, unnatural chorus. I peeked through the kitchen window, just a slit through the shutters. What I saw didn't make sense. The tornado had split, not just into multiple funnels, but into limb-like appendages, a thick, muscular arms trailing fingers that dragged along the ground. They punched into the earth, re-emerged, and twisted like they were tasting the soil. One limb slammed into a grain silo half a mile away, causing it to explode in a bloom of rust and metal. Is that thing alive? Jared asked behind me. I didn't answer. I was staring at the intercom. It buzzed again, with that same low tone. Then the light on the panel turned red, Alert. System integrity compromised. Shelter may not remain viable. See lowest point. Prepare for secondary events. What the hell is a secondary event? Jared asked. I didn't know, but I could feel it building, like a weight pressing through the ceiling. The wind wasn't lessening. If anything, it seemed to be seeking us out, and it knew we were inside. We barricaded the doors with whatever we could find: a couch, chairs, the mattress from upstairs. The intercom light blinked red the entire time. Trevon came to briefly, muttering something about the walls breathing. He passed out again seconds later. At one point, Jared asked, "Did we even book this place through a verified host?" It was a throwaway comment, but it stuck in my brain. After we got Trevon stable again, I pulled out my phone to see for myself if we still had no signal. To my dismay, we didn't, but the VRBO app still had an offline cache of our last correspondence. The listing was gone. It wasn't marked inactive or cancelled. It had just a broken bar vanished. Gone were the photos and our reservation record. It was as if we'd never even booked it. The only thing left was the owner's message thread. I clicked it. It said, "User not found. This account has been terminated." A little farther down, it continued, "This property was removed due to false identity documentation and unverifiable ownership." My stomach turned. He wasn't even the owner. Jared looked up. What? Whoever listed this place. VRBO says he faked the ID. Then who the hell was he? Before I could answer, the intercom buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a warning, it was a forecast. Precipitation incoming, anomalous hail detected, external temperatures dropping, seek reinforced shelter, estimated impact, 6 minutes. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Anomalous hail? I cried. What does that even mean? Jared asked. Trevon groaned from the couch. Dried streaks of blood solidified on his cheek. We didn't wait. We grabbed him, still barely conscious, and carried him toward the crawlspace hatch in the hall closet. It was bolted shut with a steel bar and a crank lock, and took us a minute to get it open. The air that wafted out was musty, cold, and damp. Below was a small, unfinished space, with low ceilings, packed dirt, and old insulation falling in clumps from between the joists. We dropped down just as the first impact struck the roof with a thunderous crash. Another, and another quickly followed it, each of them loud enough to shake dust from the beams. Then came the smell, sharp, chemical, and wrong. I angled my phone light up through the crack in the floorboards. Some sort of black fluid was melting through, bubbling on contact. Each drop left a small, fuming hole where it landed, eating through the wood and metal like acid. I backed away fast. "It's burning through." Jared pointed toward the corner. "There's a some pit or something under the house. Might be lower ground." We dragged Trevon that way, huddled behind an old tool cabinet, listening as the hail kept falling as spiked balls of some frozen, unidentifiable compound, each one sizzling as it chewed its way through the roof. From above came a sound like a stovetop igniting a woomfa, and something heavy collapsed. I stared at the intercom speaker and the floor joist. One had seemingly been built into every room. Containment failing. Shelter breached. Next phase imminent. What the hell does that mean? Jared screamed, no longer concealing his panic. I shushed him, expecting further instructions, but there were none. Just the constant, maddening sound of dripping, banging, and screaming coming from outside. Jared curled into himself. Why is this happening to us? What is this? I had no answers. All I had was Trevon's blood, still tacky, on my hands. I shook my head, defeated. We stayed huddled in the crawlspace for hours. Time didn't seem to move right down there, either too fast or not at all. At some point, I realized I hadn't heard hail in a willy, just a low hiss above us, like corrosive steam working its way through layers of timber and hardware. Trevon stirred once, muttering my name. His eye socket had stopped bleeding, but the skin around it had gone pale and waxy. Jared sat slumped beside him, arms tucked to his chest, rocking like he was trying to retreat into himself. I pulled my phone again. I still had no signal or notifications, and the saved listing was still absent. All that was left was the lingering VRBO error. This account has been terminated. This time, when I clicked the host's profile, the app crashed completely. I sighed and held my breath, then lifted my head toward the joists. The intercom hadn't made a sound in hours. which almost made things worse. But just as I shifted to check on Trevon again, the speaker crackled back to life. Flash flood warning, black flood approaching, avoid contact, exposure risk, substantial, substance is non-aqueous, expect sudden emergence. Jared blinked. Flood? From where? It hasn't rained. And then, as if it had been waiting for us to doubt it, we heard the first gurgle, coming from beneath us, from the earth itself. In the back corner of the crawlspace, where the sump had dipped deepest, a thick, sluggish bubble emerged, as if the dirt was melting. Something black and syrupy pressed upward through the soil, splitting the clay, oozing in our direction. I shouted for Jared, already grabbing Trevon under the arms. We hauled him backward across the floor as the pit filled. The stuff was thick and oily, and it was moving fast. It clung to the ground, then started creeping, stretching out in slow tendrils. Jared kicked one of the plastic crates into its path to slow its momentum. It hissed on contact and melted to slag in seconds. Look out, you guys. It's not water, I said, as the substance rapidly approached my friends. It's not water. The goo touched Trevon's ankle. He spasmed as the fluid crawled up his leg like ivy in defiance of gravity, wrapping his calf and thigh and holding on tightly. We screamed and pulled him away from the ooze with all our might, but made little progress, the viscous fluid stretching in long ropes as we attempted to free him. Behind us, more of it seeped through the wall. The flood wasn't rising from one place yet, it was everywhere, sprouting from cracks in the dirt, swelling up from seams in the stone. It surrounded us with unnatural speed. We reached a half-rotted bench press frame left by a previous guest and climbed atop it, keeping Trevon between us. Jared whimpered as the goo lapped at his shoes, and then the tendrils grew longer, some thinning into filaments that reached for us like antennae. One brushed Jared's arm and he froze, as if he just grabbed hold of a live wire. Jared, his body went rigid, and his eyes widened. Foam bubbled at the edge of his lips. The goo slithered up his neck and over his jaw. He didn't scream or resist. Instead, involuntarily, he breathed it in, a slow, wet gulp as the black fluid crawled into his nose, mouth, and ears. He fell backward, convulsing, arms flailing. The bench frame rattled. I tried to pull him back, but it was like trying to rescue someone drowning in tar. The goo opened over his face, like a gaping maw, and sealed. His features distorted beneath it, bubbling and twitching. Something deep inside him let out a sound I'll never forget, like a laugh submerged in boiling oil. Then he went still. His chest stopped rising. Even then, the substance wouldn't leave him be. It continued sinking into him, filling every orifice. Trevon moaned beside me, his one good eye focused on Jared's body. Is he ? He asked, unexpectedly coherent. I couldn't answer, not really, but I nodded anyway. Just then, the intercom buzzed again. Casualty registered. Flood level, 67%. Realm breach imminent. Perimeter unstable. What the hell is a realm breach? I whispered. The crawlspace shuddered. Trevon clutched his stomach, groaning again. Something's wrong. I looked down. The black goo had touched the base of the frame. It was climbing again. I scanned the crawlspace. We had nowhere else to go. The walls were leaking now, everything sweating the stuff. It wasn't so much as pouring in as being birthed. We needed a way out. Trevon, help me, I whispered. We've got to get higher. Trevon didn't move. Come on, I shouted, shaking him. We've got to go. We don't have much time. He just sat there, staring at Jared's corpse. The black sludge had contorted his mouth into a no shape. His eyes were still open beneath the muck. I don't want to die like he a broken bar like that, Trevon whispered. You're not going to, I shouted, but we have to move. Now, we hoisted ourselves onto a rusted shelf bolted to the far wall, standing on bags of gravel and old drywall. It wasn't safer, but it was higher, a few extra inches of not dying. From below, the black flood surged. We pressed flat against the joists above and waited. The intercom's light turned red again. Next event imminent. Breach point forming. Biological threat and bound. Threat level, apex. Duration, indefinite. Then came the cracking noise, like glass under pressure, followed by the sound of something shattering. A thin ribbon of light cut through the gloom, shimmering just above the flood line. Then another, like slashes in reality. Trevon stared. Area broken bar. Arthusia broken bar. Windows, No, I said definitively. They were tears, rips in the crawlspace, and through them came movement. First, a claw, no, not a claw, a leg, chitinous and segmented, then another, then a face, with a long, canine snout, but too thin and flexible, and black, bulbous eyes. The whole head was crowned with pincers. The thing pulled itself through one of the rips like it was climbing out of its own reflection. Behind it came another, and another. Their bodies made no sound, but the flood responded, parting for them and lifting them up. They moved like sharks in deep water, and they were hunting. I grabbed Trevon's arm. He was silent now, locked up again. One of the creatures sniffed the air, clicking its mandibles. Then, like a puppet, its head snapped toward us with incredible speed, and it began swimming up the side of the crawlspace. Trevon whimpered. I reached for the closet thing to a weapon I could find, a rusted wrench left on a nearby beam. When the thing reached us, I swung, striking it in the face. The beast recoiled, chittering, retreating down into the flood. A moment later, another latched onto Trevon's leg, clutching him tightly and bit. He screamed. I'll never forget the way it sounded, so much worse than the screaming flesh cyclones beyond the rental's walls. I swung again, smashing the thing's shell, but it didn't flinch. Unperturbed, it clamped its jaws down and dragged Trevon halfway off the ledge. No, 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 I screamed, lunging for Trevon in a last-ditch effort to save him. That's when the wall exploded. A fresh funnel cloud blasted through the breach, this one thicker and faster, packed with spinning detritus. But the debris wasn't made up of bits of trees or shingle, they were teeth, millions of them, a literal wall of enamel and calcified roots, and they struck us like a wave. Trevon's body was lifted from the shelf and shredded, cutting off his shrieks of agony midair, as he was mercilessly torn limb from limb, blood misting across the beams. I screamed, covering my face. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. A moment later, the intercom said, emotionlessly, "All clear. Storm event terminated. Thank you for your business." And I passed out. When I came to, the crawlspace was bone dry, as if nothing had ever been there. There was no sign of the black sludge or gorgon, no scent, residue, or stains. Even the formerly warped floor joists had snapped back like memory foam. It was enough to make me feel as if I had somehow imagined the entire thing, but I knew I hadn't. My hands were sticky with someone's blood, probably Trevon's. This had been no hallucination. I stumbled out of the sump pit, through the kitchen, and outside through what was left of the front door, half torn off and swinging on one hinge. The porch was gone. Most of the roof had collapsed inward, and what remained of the metal siding looked like it had been melted with a blowtorch. Everything else in the house, including the furniture, walls, and hot tub, had been either mangled or buried under debris. There were no tire tracks in the gravel, aside from our own, and no sign of emergency response, not so much as a hint of ash or smoke. Everything was still, or so I thought, until I noticed the tree. About 30 yards out, an old oak stood leaning sideways in the wind. Something hung from it, tangled in the upper branches. I already knew what it was, but I walked there anyway. Trevon's skeleton was suspended in a loose net of fiber, some maybe fishing line, perhaps something else. His bones had been picked clean, his jaw hung open, one of his arms was missing. What remains of his skull had a gouged out, fractured orbit where his eye used to be. All across the ribs, hips, and arms were hundreds of tiny, bite-shaped divots. I couldn't scream. I no longer had it in me. Instead, I just dropped to my knees and stared. I stayed like that until dusk. No one came. No one ever came. Eventually, I mustered the energy to climb back into our truck and head back down the road until I got a bar or two of service. Then I called 911 and told them a broken bar something. Not the truth, obviously, just that a freak tornado had hit us, and that my friends were either missing or dead. Search and rescue found the ruins later that day. Trevon's body was never recovered. By the time responders arrived, the bones in the tree were gone, vanished as mysteriously as the storm that had arrived and taken his life. Jared's remains were never located. I reported the black sludge, the teeth, and the intercom warnings to the authorities. They nodded and took notes. Asked if I'd been drinking, which, of course, we had. A detective pulled me aside and insultingly asked how many tabs I'd dropped. When I insisted that an intercom-based weather reporting system had spoken to us directly, he asked if I'd ingested psilocybin. They never ordered toxicology reports. They didn't bother to catalog evidence or dig through the remains of the building, never took samples of the walls, or the floor, or the single, twisted scrap of bone I'd found behind what remained of the water heater. One officer asked if I was sure it wasn't a bone from an animal. Later, they found a single tooth buried at the base of the trunk, and said it looked like a cow's. Eventually, they ruled it an act of God, attributing the structural collapse to storm damage, and listed both of my friend's official causes of death as undetermined. After several days of futile, half-hearted searches turned up nothing. The only evidence I had that either of my friends had even been there was the blood on my hands, but even that wasn't enough to convince anyone that something awful and far more bizarre than a tornado had happened. Unofficially, I was marked as a trauma case. A few people whispered about shock and hallucinations. The listing, still wiped, VRBO claimed the host's account was removed for cause, and offered me a $50 gift card and a tone-deaf message about customer safety being a top priority. I didn't sleep for weeks. Something more profound gnawed at me. If what we experienced wasn't natural, if that house was more lure than shelter, then it couldn't have been the first time. And more importantly, would it be the last? I had my doubts. As such, my obsession with finding answers grew, and I began digging through old listings, deleted forums, and Reddit threads that had been flagged and removed. I found nothing directly, but I remembered the layout, the architecture, even the damp porch swing. I broadened my search, looking for VRBO listings that bore similarities. It took weeks, but I found it, a newly listed property in rural Arizona with no reviews. The photos showed a modern cabin. It appeared clean and inviting, with the desert sun spilling across the porch. It had the same wide metal shutters and polished kitchen, 2 bedrooms, an attic bunk. Even the storm intercom was visible in the background of one shot, with the same speaker grill beside the fridge. I zoomed in. A yellow post-it was stuck just above it. Don't turn me off. Not even for a second. The host's username, predictably, was just a string of numbers. There was no photo or bio, and the account was listed as having been recently verified. The property description welcomed travelers to enjoy the silence of the desert, far from civilization and perfect for storm season. And it was available that weekend. I sat there for a long time, motionless and unblinking, staring at the screen. If you looked at the shadows in the corners of those photos, where the walls met the floor, you could see the black crust and the remnants of yet another black flood. And the house? It wasn't rebuilt. It was the same one. I was sure of it. It had somehow been disassembled and relocated and was ready for someone new. I never went back to school after that. My football scholarship was quietly cancelled within weeks of the news breaking. They said it was a paperwork issue, but nobody fought it, not even me. The team coach sent a condolence text and then never followed up. No trace of Jared was ever found, not so much as a scrap of fabric or a puddle of blood. His parents posted flyers and opened a GoFundMe, but after 6 months they stopped talking about it altogether. I don't blame them. Trevor had a closed-casket funeral. They buried his old jerseys and Letterman jacket, along with photos of him. I gave a eulogy I don't remember writing and stared at the ceiling of the church the whole time, half expecting it to shudder and split open. I still have nightmares to this day. Locally, the story goes that we were caught in a freak tornado, and the structure we had been renting collapsed. A newspaper ran a 1-paragraph blurb under the heading, "College Students Caught in Weekend Storm. 2 Dead, including star running back." No one interviewed me, no one asked what really happened. And even if they had, I doubt they would have believed me. In small-town Texas, the law doesn't work like it does in other places. If a death fits a box, they seal it and move on. And when it doesn't, they make it fit. Case closed. A few more months passed. I tried to move on, but something continued keeping me up. Every night, in the stillness, I'd hear that voice again. Black flood approaching. Avoid contact. Exposure risk substantial. I tried to track down the Arizona VRBO listing again. That was gone now, too. Another dead end. Though something told me that if I dug deeply enough, I'd eventually find listings from the town there, where several people had recently gone missing, with it blamed on a freak storm. But I didn't want to find out what happened in Arizona. I wanted to anticipate where it would happen next, and so I kept looking. I imagined that if I found where it went, or where it had come from, I could prove it hadn't all been madness, that Trevon and Jared didn't die because we partied too hard or ignored a storm alert, but because some Inya or something that laid a trap for us in that house. And eventually, I'm proud to say, I found what I was looking for. Another new listing, in yet another state, New Mexico, this time, situated in remote desert flatland. Like the others, it had no reviews, and the property owner had no bio, and a badge saying they were recently verified. The structure was the same. It had an identical porch and sloping roofline, as well as the same front-facing windows and reinforced siding. They'd moved the entire house, again, or built another one exactly like it. I had no idea how they managed such a thing long ago. I had suspected the paranormal, but that didn't matter, not anymore. I was certain this was my opportunity to make everything right again. In one of the photos, behind the kitchen counter, you can barely see the weather warning intercom, but it's there. And just below it, there's the all-too-familiar yellow post-it note, with a telltale message, "Don't turn me off." Not even for a second. I stared at the listing for hours. Then I booked it, next weekend, for 3 nights. This time, I'm going alone, to find out what it truly is, and to make sure no one else ever walks through that door again. I'm going so that Trevon and Jared's deaths aren't in vain, and I'm burning it to the ground, once and for all. It should have killed me when it had the chance. If I don't come back, just know, the storm's not over. And if it continues, it'll be over my dead body. Pop. He slung a long, blue-clothed leg over a corner of my desk, grinned down at me. I'll be shoving off again by midnight. He looked 10 years younger than when I'd last seen him. Wind and the sun had bronzed him, hooded his gaze with an eagle's drooped lids, and the 1 or 2 threads of gray in his black hair served only to give him a certain solidity. A bit of luck gave me the chance to wangle the first shore leave I've had in 5 months. It might be luck, but with the word pain had come into his gray eyes and a slow smolder of anger. Picked up a drifting ship's boat, he explained, with some poor sons aboard more dead than alive. Jerry's got another one, has he? I grabbed for my phone. Wada City desk. Gina, what was it? Where? Oh, okay. His face had gone blank. Okay, George, I forgot. Quote, no information shall be published unless and until released by the Commandant, 3rd Naval District. Unquote. So the radio can spill it first, I added bitterly, and make our headlines look like the march of time a year behind the band. Now in A18 you wouldn't remember, you were in the Navy then too, but back in A18 had to fight your way into the building through the crowds waiting for extras. Or was that the fracas in A98? If you're hinting, you young whippersnapper, that I'm old enough to what in blazes are you wasting time here for? Anyway, why aren't you on your way up to Westchester to see your son? No train till 1:07, which gives me about 45 minutes to listen. Pop, something's come up that I wonder if you could help me out. Fishing in a pocket of his uniform, he looked and sounded exactly like the shy but earnest cub who, when I was in this lot, in the 20s, used to come to me with 1,000 eager questions. I picked up a copy of the Globe this morning, the first I've seen since Christmas, and I always read the agony column first, don't you? I ought to. Seeing it was I tipped you that the personal ads are a good spot to find hints for off-trail items. This hit me in the eye. George put a torn-out clipping in front of me and added, an odd note of significance in his tone, in today's sheet. It was 4 lines of 6-point type. The first line, light face caps and small caps, couple will care for the duration, without charge, for the child of a widower who wishes to volunteer for military service. Country home, phone Carsville 465. I looked up. This would have struck you just right 5 months ago, Buta. It did. I answered that same ad 5 months ago, and parked Pete with the old couple who'd inserted it. I'd been on vacation, I recalled. He'd been gone when I returned. That's how I was able to get back into uniform without worrying about the brat. So someone else got the idea. So what? It's good, isn't it? I said the same ad, Pop. He spoke quietly, but it was obvious he was disturbed. Exactly the same, even to the phone number. I checked in my address book. It's the same people. Okay, your Peter worked out well, and they've decided to take in another kid. There isn't room for another. The Bairds live in a small bungalow, and the one guest room is tiny. 2 boys might share it, if they got one of these 2-story beds you see advertised. Yes, he tautened again. They don't specify a boy, Pop. Look here. See, they say child. Pete's 12 and alright, maybe I'm nuts, but I've got a nagging sort of hunch. What I came down here for was to find out if that ad's appeared any other time since the lad's been up there. What would that prove? Well, a broken bar. I picked up the phone, told Jen to get me the morgue, and informed Ed Brawls of my request. Now suppose we get sensible, George, I suggested. Have you any sane reason to suspect anything's wrong with the boy? Number. I haven't seen him since late January, but he's written me fairly regularly. His breast pocket produced a packet of pencil-smudged half-sheets. His letters are all pretty much alike. He pulled one from under the elastic that held them together, unfolded it, like this. "Hey dear Dad, how are you?" "I'm fine. I hit a 3-bagger Saturday. We won, 16-12, and George checked, brown fingers tightening on the paper. "I'll be damned," he said softly. "What's hit you?" He didn't answer. He put the letter down on the desk, selected another from the opposite side of the packet, glanced through it, and grunted. "I thought I remembered a broken bar. Listen, Pop, that letter's 6 weeks old. This one came yesterday, but listen, I hit a 3-bagger Saturday. We won, 16-12. What do you make of that?" "Coincidence?" "Think so?" George had both papers on the desk, side by side, and was looking back and forth between the two, lips compressed. "Grim. Take a look at this and see if you still think it's a coincidence." I bent over and studied the sheets. "I see what you mean. The rest of the wording is different, but those 2 statements, just alike, are in exactly the same relative positions on the 2 pages. As if," he half-whispered, "as if one were traced from the other." I couldn't be positive without superimposing them with an intense light behind, but it certainly looked as if every character of the endearing, childish scrawl on the one sheet was identical with its corresponding character on the other. Yesterday's letter might be a patchwork of tracings from several earlier. "Wait," I exclaimed, abruptly relieved. "We've forgotten that you had the earlier letters. You certainly didn't give them to anyone to trace." Number. "No, I didn't, but the whole batch of these might have been prepared all at once, then mailed at intra." The phone bell cut him off. My hand beat his by a fraction of a second. "The Globe ought to make a special rate for those people. Ed has one of those telephone voices that can be heard across the room. That same ad's appeared a dozen times the last. Thanks, fellow, that's all I wanted to know." Part 2. George's eyes were gray steel, black dotted by pinpoint pupils. "If they've done anything to Paytown broken bar." He slid off the desk and started stiff-kneed toward the door. "Wait," I barked. "You've still got 20 minutes to make that train. I want to try something." He swung around. "What?" But I was rattling the bar for Jen. She came in on the line, and I told her, "Get me Carsville 465. I didn't let them know I was coming," George cautioned. His mouth twitched. I wanted to surprise Pete. In my ear a low, musical voice said, "Hello, who is it, please?" "My name's Harold Gatlin." George tugged at the receiver, and I moved it so he could get his ear to it, too. "I'm calling concerning your personal in this morning's New York Globe. You were interested in placing a child?" "A little girl." "Have you any preference?" The woman hesitated. Or perhaps I imagined it. At any rate, her reply was definite when it came. "Not at all." I saw a brown hand tighten on the desk edge, its knuckles going white. "How old is your daughter, Mr. Gatlin?" "About 10, I replied. "But she is not my daughter. I am her grandfather." "Her grandfather?" I was sure, this time, that the voice at the other end of the wire had changed. "I am afraid you do not quite understand," it said coldly. "What we have in mind is to release someone for military service. You'll be doing exactly that in this case." The somewhat nebulous impulse that had prompted me to say grandfather was crystallizing into a definite plan. "My daughter is a trained nurse. Her hospital unit has been ordered overseas, and she will have to resign unless Kay can find a home where she can be happy." "Surely she could be happy with you." "Surely. However, Unfortunately, I, too, will be leaving the country. I happen to be on the staff of a broken bar, a certain magazine. I'd almost said newspaper, realized just in time this would be too clear a tie-up with George, and have been given an assignment that will keep me abroad indefinitely. I see. Her tone was still tentative. Are there no relatives, or close friends perhaps, who can take care of the little girl? It was evident now what she was after. None. Helen was divorced shortly after Kay was born, and, well, I ventured an embarrassed little laugh. It would be about the worst possible thing for the child if she were to come under the influence of her father or his family. I'm sure you understand, Mrs. A. Barrett, she filled in. Mary Barrett. Yes, I think I do. She paused, began again. Would you care to bring your granddaughter up here, Mr. Gatlin? There it was, on a silver platter, precisely what I had in mind. And her mother, too, please. Mr. Barrett will be here, and we can all get to know each other before making any final decisions. Shall we say for lunch tomorrow? George had only till midnight. I am afraid not. I shall have several important conferences, and Helen will be on duty at the hospital. Would it be inconvenient if we were to skip lunch and make it this afternoon? Not at all. They would be happy to have us. I jotted down the directions she gave me, and after a final exchange of inanities, hung up. George's jaw was ridged with knotted small muscles, his nostrils pinched. Its being a girl didn't faze her. No, I agreed softly. But did you get the rest of it? Your Mary Barrett was plenty careful to make sure that no one would be dropping in unexpectedly. Someone's going to drop on them, like a ton of coal, just as soon as that train. Hold it, son. Hold everything. We're not going up there by train. He stared. We? What the blue X's do you think you'd accomplish, rushing in there like a red-eyed bull, except to make things tough for Peter if there's really something wrong about that setup? I'm keeping the appointment I just made, and if I don't know the whole layout before I've been in that house half an hour, I've been in the wrong business for 43 years. Shadows were blue in the hollows of his gaunt cheeks. It won't work. They'll smell a rat when you show up there without this family you invented. The only thing I invented, I chuckled as once more I picked up the phone, was that stuff about Helen's being a nurse. Jen, will you ask Mrs. Clark to step in here, please? I cradled the instrument. She's been Martha Proper's assistant on the woman's page since about 2 weeks after you left us. You never told me you had a daughter. I never had one, till Kay Clark adopted me as her grandfather, and her mother seconded the motion. Quite something, that youngster. But here's Helen. As she pulled the door shut behind her, she saw George. Her irises, a luminous brown flecked with gold, dilated slightly, and for the briefest instant, breath was caught between the warm, red bows of her lips. Then she turned to me. You asked me to come in? Helen is long-flanked, slender, but her voice is a deep contralto underlaid by a vague huskiness that pulls at my old heartstrings. I did. Her dark gray suit was professional enough, despite the sweater that molded her curves, but something would have to be done about that unruly tousle of chestnut hair. This is George Carson, Helen. I think you've heard me speak of him, once or twice. The smile with which she acknowledged the introduction was frank, friendly. Did you know, Lieutenant, that not a single stick of literate copy has appeared in the Globe since you beat your typewriter into a torpedo tube? I shouldn't wonder, he said, abstractedly looking at his wristwatch. I watched the girl's upper lip start to curl, and said, Helen, you're going up to Westchester with us this afternoon. Right now, I couldn't possibly. I've got 4 more ways of disguising watercress as food to think up before deadline, and a column of love Lauren Blaha. Phone Kay's school to have her ready for us to pick up. I pushed creakingly to my feet. I'm going downstairs to circulation, to wangle the loan of a car out of Ramsey. Meet me out front in 10 minutes. Amusement crinkled the corners of Helen's eyes and mouth. Perfect? She exclaimed, applauding with silent palms. Call yourselves reporters? Snarled Scrooge, the demon editor. Come with me and I'll show you how to get the story. Right. A story the radio won't beat us to, for once. Number. Her face fell. No, you're kidding me. If it was, really, you wouldn't want Kay along. Kay's the key to the whole thing, I said from the door. I was to recall saying that, in a moment of horror. George will explain, while you're getting your duds. I stopped for a moment to straighten things out with Helen's boss. Martha's never liked me, but there's one advantage in being around a shop as long as I have. You know where all the skeletons are buried. Part 3. I don't know any landscape in the world more nostalgically lovely than New York's Westchester County. The rolling hills, brilliant with soft green flame, the blue-gray haze in the hollows, the limpid chatter of tumbling small streams so you can have your cat dessert before the war. Your Isle of Capri. I'll take the Sawmill River Road in April. I was driving, and Kay was a vibrant little bundle of restlessness beside me. We'd told her only that when we got where we were going, we would pretend that I was her real grandfather, her mother an army nurse, and that we were looking for a place for her to live. It's something for the paper, Helen had explained, and so it's not really a lie but just making believe. Which bit of sophistry had at least eased the mother's conscience. However, it had been accepted by the child. She was a brat, but a nice one. A sprinkling of freckles across the bridge of a tiny, tip-tilted nose, close-cropped hair the color of honey. A one sometimes surprised a wistfulness in Kay's pert countenance that vanished the instant she knew herself observed. Left almost from infancy to her own devices, and the scant supervision of such maids by the day as a very slim purse could afford, she was altogether self-sufficient. Yet on occasion she could display a surprising capacity for deep affection. Just why she'd chosen to extend this to the crusty, cynical old curmudgeon I am, I never pretended to comprehend. Don't forget, Pop, George broke in on my thoughts. You turn off into a side road, left, just beyond that curve ahead. I'm driving this car, I growled, and I don't need any help. I glanced up into the rear view mirror, discreetly tilted to reflect the rear compartment. He sat bolt upright at one end of the seat, expressionless except for the throb of his temple. Helen was in the other corner, as far as she could get from him. I'd maneuvered to get them back there together, with the disingenuous statement that the car had been loaned to me on my express promise that I alone would drive it, and the help of Kay's insistence on riding up front. I had my trouble for my pains. Helen's half-hearted attempts at conversation had elicited only monosyllabic grunts from her companion, and she'd finally sunk into a brown study of her own. I couldn't blame George. Peter was more to him than his son. He was the living memory of the wife whose death, 6 years ago, had come near to breaking the man. Slowing on the long curve and watching for a chance to break through the opposing flow of traffic to the side road whose narrow entrance was banked with azaleas, I decided that there must be at least 10 years between those two. Helen had been 18 when she'd contracted the unfortunate marriage that had lasted only long enough to produce Kay. The girl had had a tough time, but she'd wanna. The azaleas brushed the car's sides, and their fragrance filled it. Oh, shucks, Grandpa Harry, Kay pouted. Now I can't watch it anymore. See what, grandchild Kay? A tomahawk, I think it was. I'd have been sure in another second that you'd seen a tomahawk, I teased. I didn't know there were any more Indians in these parts. She giggled, delighted at my mistake. A Curtiss tomahawk, Grandpa, a pursuit plane. It was flying around and around, way high up, and all of a sudden, it started to fly straight, like the pilot saw something. Do you think it was Jap bombers he saw? Maybe? Do you think maybe they're coming to bomb New York and kill a lot of people and a question mark? Stop it, Kay. Helen's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it to her daughter. Stop it this instant. And then she was apologizing. All this is so peaceful. I'd forgotten all about the war. Please find something else to talk about, sweetheart. Why should she? George demanded harshly. What else is there to talk about, or think about? She twisted to him. But not the children, Lieutenant Carson. Please. Not the children. He looked at her, not really seeing her. Do you think you can hide from them the filthy world we've made for them to live in? We ought to try. Ought we? Listen, Mrs. Clark. In the lifeboat we picked up last night, there was a refugee boy, 6 or 7 years old by his size. His size was the only way you could tell anything about him. He'd been burned. They told me at the Naval Hospital that he will live, that they're hopeful he will not be badly scarred. His body, they meant. What about the scars on his soul? Do you think? Reaching brush whispered along the sides of the car, but within the vehicle, there was only the hiss of Helen's pulled-in breath. Listen, George said again. I used to read to my son from the great books of all time. I used to take him to the art galleries, the concert halls, teaching him what beauty man can create. At other times, we would go where a skyscraper or bridge was being erected, or a tunnel was being dug, learning about the usefulness humans can build with a bit of strength. And if I happened to write a line that sang, a paragraph that shone, I carried it home to Peter in my hands, and he was very proud of his father. He laughed, shortly, bitterly. What have I now to show my son, to bring home to him? Congratulate your old man, Pete. Today I dropped a depth bomb and blasted a submarine. K broke in. Wide-eyed. Did you? That's swell. Was it a German one? K. No, Mrs. Clark, it's no use. George came around to her daughter, his lips smiling. Yes, it was a German. K. We know, because some things came up to the top of the water, splintered wood, shattered a well, things that float. One was a kid box that must have belonged to one of the sailors. It was watertight, and among the other things in it, there was a picture of a blonde little girl, about your age, with a little button nose and pigtails. On the picture was written, A combald dinem Elsa 014 ck, Vader, which in English means, A come back soon to your Elsa, father, but Elsa's father won't ever come back to her because I killed him. Isn't that a pity? Kay nodded, speechless for once. Oh, George exclaimed. I forgot. We're certain it was that very submarine which torpedoed the ship that had almost brought the little boy I was talking about safely to America. It might even have been Elsa's father who aimed the torpedo. That's different. I'm glad you killed him. I'm awfully glad. There was an incoherent sound in Helen's throat. They know you're despicable, George Carson. He swung back to her. Of course I am. So are we all. We're all trapped in a despicable, brutal world, and there's no escape. No longer the slightest possibility of escape for me or you or Kay or Pete. He repeated, the name a groan, and he sank back into his corner, hands closing into tight fists on his thighs. After that, there was no more talk, except for Kay's chatter. The road climbed steadily through a rustling, second-growth thicket, and for all the signs of human habitation, we might have been 5,000 miles from New York instead of 50. We crested a hill, gazed at the distant Tappan Zee, and in the sky above its silver shimmer, glimpsed a V of black planes flying south. The woods closed around us once more as the road dipped into leafy shadow. My mind clung to those planes. There had been a waspish sort of haste about their flight, an odd sense of urgency. They were ours, of course. They must be ours. If they were not, the guns I knew to be hidden all through this placid countryside would be blasting. A light struck through slim, young boles ahead, and I started braking. I checked the figures on my speedometer. 13 miles from the Sawmill River. This must be it. George had his car door open before the car had stopped. I caught up with him, and we made as little noise as possible, working our way through the underbrush. We reached the edge of the thicket and peered through a green screen of brambles. A lush meadow sloped gently away from before us, affording pasturage to a half-dozen brown and white cows. In the hollow below was a grove of tall, old maples, and beneath their leafy spread nestled a low-roofed, small house, its shingled walls mottled gray, brown, and velvet green by moss and weather. Yes, George breathed. That's it. The sun struck through the trees, brightening the rear of the house, and the shadows it cast were deep purple. George's fingers dug into my arm, bruising. Look there, Pop. In that bush. His grip transmitted to me the tremor that ran through him. See it? I located what he meant. One of those model planes boys build and fly. It was caught, nose down, in a welter of thorny withs not 5 yards from us. Rain spattered, stained by mold, but seemingly intact. That's Pete's, George whispered. That design painted on the fuselage, it's one he worked out for himself, and he put it on all his planes. So what? We know he was here. What we're out to find out is if he's here now. We've found out. Pete would never have let that plane deteriorate like that if he could have helped it. Even when one of his models was damaged, he always salvaged the usable parts for the next one. He isn't here, and he hasn't been here for weeks. It was abruptly chilly, there at the edge of the woods. Okay, I said, you wait here while we go down and find out where he is, and why. It took almost physical persuasion to get him to agree. Part 4. The room, extending all across the front of the house, was low-ceiled, its woodwork dark with the mellow patina of the years, but dancing flames in a fieldstone fireplace, a massing of flowers in the deep-silled, many-paned windows, made it very cheerful. The furniture, much used but not shabby, had a timeless grace of line that made altogether appropriate the juxtaposition of, say, the plum-colored Georgian sofa where Kay sat demurely beside her mother with the Heppel-white chair Mary Barrett occupied. "Yes, Mrs. Clark." Her low voice was as musical as I'd heard it on the telephone. "John and I have always loved children, though we've never had any of our own. I suppose that was what prompted this plan of yours." "Yes," John Barrett replied. "We wanted to help, and it seemed the best way." He stood behind his wife, blue-veined hand on her shoulder in an unschooled gesture of affection. As so often happens when two people have lived long together, there was a definite physical resemblance between the white-haired couple. Both had the same broad, thoughtful brows, the same clear transparency of skin that age had not so much wrinkled as brushed with a tracery of fine lines that crinkled with kindly humor at the corners of bright little eyes and emphasized the sensitiveness of thin, pale lips. "The only way we could." "It's a wonderful way," Helen smiled. I was at my wit's end regarding what to do about both the old people, she in her modest black silk dress with its relieving, creamy lace at the throat, he in a well-worn velvet smoking jacket open to reveal high-cut, lapelled vest and ascot cravat. There was a fragile, almost spiritual quality utterly disarming to anyone but a newspaperman who cynically recalled a certain woman convicted for swindling her fellow church members, the sanctified countenance of a certain mass poisoner. The wall opposite that through which we had entered was, save for a single, closed door, completely covered with books, and I was putting this circumstance to good use. No book lover could find anything alarming in a visitor's browsing along his shelves, but such a random occupation can cover a very thorough visual scrutiny of a room. This one was warmly lived in, but nowhere was there any hint of the kind of disorder with which even the best-behaved boy of 12 inevitably betrays his presence in a home. At my wits' ends, Helen repeated, "Nurses are needed so desperately with our expeditionary forces, but I have a duty to my daughter, too." She did not ask me to bring her into the world. No, Barrett agreed with the cliché tilde copyright. She did not. A mother's first duty is to her child, but I'm positive Kay will be very happy with us. I'm sure of that, now that I've met you both. There's only one thing that still troubles me. Won't my little girl be lonely here, without any other children for company? No, the woman responded, with assurance. I can guarantee that she will not be lonely. Then you do have another child here. Clever girl. I suppose he's at school? Neat. Very neat. Will he be home soon enough for us to meet him? She'd rocked them right back on their heels. If she had. Mary Barrett made a quick recovery. Unfortunately, our little house is too small for more than one youngster, but I want you to see the rest of it. She rose, held out a hand to Kay. Come, my dear, and see the lovely room that will be yours if your mother decides to let you stay with us for a while. You'd like her too, wouldn't you? Oh, yes. Kay jumped up and came eagerly to her. You're awfully nice. No child could simulate her glowing enthusiasm. Auntie is too. You're almost as nice as Mom and Grandpa Harry. Don't ever tell me again, I thought, that a child's instinct is unerring. Helen got to her feet to join them, and John Barrett came toward me. Ah, Mr. Gatlin, he smiled. I see you've found the most prized of my possessions. Thea, I glanced down at the book in my hand. It was open to a page of abstruse mathematical formulae. I'm afraid this is quite meaningless to me. I shouldn't wonder. He chuckled. There are supposed to be only a dozen men in the world who can really understand it. But have you seen the flyleaf? Why, number? I turned to it, found an inscription in an angular, very foreign hand. Most interesting. A to John Barrett, who has progressed much farther along the path we both tread than I can ever hope to. The signature was that of the foremost physicist of our day. He was altogether too kind when he wrote that, the old man murmured. All I've done is to find a practical application of his discovery of the essential identity of space and time, matter and energy. John, dear, his wife's gentle tones intervened. Don't you think Mr. Gatlin would like to look around with us? I'm as proud of my kitchen, she favored me with that vague, sweet smile of hers, as John is of his books. You have every right to be. Helen's voice came from somewhere beyond the now open door in the book-lined wall. "Just look at this, Father." I crossed a dim hallway, went in through another doorway. The white-tiled room was walled on one side by enameled cupboards, chromium-trimmed. A solid-fronted counter ran the full length of the other side, its grayish mono-metal glowing in the sunlight that poured through a gaily curtained window open to the rustle of the maples and smells of spring. "Where's the stove?" I demanded. "The refrigerator? The sink?" "I'm a brass monkey if this looks like a kitchen." Barrett laughed softly, going past me to the counter. He touched something. A panel lifted up out of the top to reveal the spiraled wires of an electric range. Another flick of his hand exposed a rectangular basin, 2 feet deep, containing a large, circular wire basket. Kay was beside him, excited. "What's that for?" "You stack your dirty dishes in there, honey." And he must have towed a pedal in the base for abruptly steaming water sprayed into the cavity, from beneath its upper rim. The lashing jets met, swirled. Suddenly, the wire basket was filled with a foaming mass of soap suds, and suddenly the sprays were clear water again, magically rinsing away the soap. Barrett chuckled. "Now isn't that an easy way to wash dishes, Kay?" "It's swell, but you still got to wipe them." "No, you don't." The basket was revolving. It was whirling so fast that it seemed to have disappeared. "You just whisk the wet away." The panels closed down, as if of their own motion. "It's all done by pressing these buttons to see eerie along the edge of the counter." "What else is there?" Kay demanded. "Well, I tell you what. Suppose you push all the buttons you can find and see what happens." Barrett turned to me, for all his silver hair very much like a youngster showing off. "Some of the devices in here I bought. Most I constructed myself. And even those manufactured by others I've found ways to improve." "Very clever," I grunted. "You certainly have a way with children." Helen was admiring. "You couldn't have thrilled Kay more than you've done by letting her play with those gadgets. But I should think a boy would be in seventh heaven." That was almost too obvious. "A little older boy. About 12, say." "Quite right. Now I recall Weena. Shall we go look at the other rooms?" Once more, Mary Barrett interrupted her husband. And this time I was positive she was deliberately forestalling some indiscretion. "It's getting on, and you ought to start back early enough to be on the parkway before dark. That road through the woods can be treacherous at night." Yet, as she took Helen's arm and urged her out into the hall, she was just a smiling little old lady as demure and naive seeming as the one Whistler once painted. "You have no idea how dark it gets." "Why, Mary?" Barrett protested. "It's only 3:30. He waited at the door for me to pass out. "They've plenty of time." I took my time about it, so that when I reached the passage, the women were well down toward its end. As the old man started to follow, I blocked him off and demanded, low tone but imperatively, "Where's Peter Carson?" Part 5. He was startled, no doubt of that. "Shocked." "Come across," I growled. "What have you done with the lad?" His gray lips quivered. A dull thud shook the house. A rolling growl was like distant thunder, but through the kitchen window, the leaf-fretted sky was blue and cloudless. Once more the thud, and again, and the far-off rumble once more. "John!" There was alarm in Mary Barrett's cry. "Those planes before Rhea, are those bombs?" "John, are they bombing New York?" And that reminded me of Kay asking the same question on the Sawmill River Road. And I realized I did not see her back there in the kitchen. "Kay," I called, going back in. "Where are you?" A giggle pulled my eyes to a hitherto unnoticed door in the side wall beyond the end of the row of cupboards. "Kay." A dress hem flicked in the narrowing space between door edge and jamb, and the door slammed shut. I reached it, grasped the knob. "Come out of there, you little imp." The door refused to open. Barrett reached me, and I heard Helen beyond him. Against the gray enamel of the doorframe, the chromium disc of a Yale lock glittered. "Kay," I called again, rapping the wood with my knuckles. "Oh, John," Mary Barrett sighed reproachfully. "You forgot again to make sure you'd pulled it tight." A bunch of keys clinked in her husband's hand. "Open it." Quickly, before Rhea she checked, fingers going to her mouth, pupils dilating. Abruptly, the floor had commenced to vibrate. It was as if someone held an electric massage machine against my soles, and the sensation was oddly frightening. Barrett's key chattered against the lock, fell away. He looked at his wife, gray lips shaping a word that would not come. The vibration stopped, as abruptly as it had begun, and I snatched the bunch of keys from him, then jabbed the one he'd selected into the serrated slit in the shining disc. Someone reached for me, but by then I already had the door open and was going through it into a small windowless room. A closet, rather. It was barely 6 feet square. Its walls and floor were of dull lead, the ceiling also. The sunlight following me in was fractured into a myriad gleaming spears by the intricate, polished metal of a machine that, head high, unfamiliar, took up the cubicle's central half. "Kay," Helen called as she entered. "Kay, where are you hiding? She must be behind this." I went around the machine and stopped short. There was enough light back here to show me every inch of the space. There was no other door. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that could conceal so much as a rabbit. Oh, but there was no Kay. "Where is she?" Helen's eyes were large and dark and appalled in a face suddenly chalk white. "What has happened to my child?" And it was then I recalled saying in my office, "AK's the key to the whole thing," and answered her, hoarsely, "The same as happened to Peter Carson." "Please." John Barrett laid a trembling hand on her arm. "Please, Mrs. Clark, don't be alarmed. Your daughter is quite safe, a little frightened, perhaps, but that is all. We can fetch her back in a twinkling if you and Mr. Gatlin will be good enough to step out into the kitchen and close the door, so you can make your getaway through the same trapdoor she blundered into." Over my first bewilderment, I'd guessed the answer. "What kind of fools do you think we are?" "But I assure you there is no it's no use, John," Mrs. Barrett broke in. "We'll have to explain, perhaps when they understand explain be damned. Bring Kay back and then start explaining about Peter. Hop to it," George Carson bellowed, abruptly thudding in. "Pronto." Barrett spun to him, recoiled from the sudden, threatening apparition, slipped, fell heavily and lay motionless. "John." The old woman gasped, went to her knees beside the sprawled, frail form. "John, if you think I could stay up there in the woods, wondering what was happening here," George answered my unspoken question, "you're crazy. I was crouched under the kitchen window when things broke loose in here, and my clasp knife was enough to get me in through the back door. It's his heart spell." Mrs. Barrett was up again. "I've got to get his drops." She evaded George's clutch at her, darted out. We both sprang after her, jammed in the doorway. Helen's let her go, pulled us back in again. "We don't need her." Kay saw something the moment she came in here. "Ah, push button," I exclaimed, a step ahead of her words. "Like the ones he told her she could monkey with." "Of course." I pointed to a vertical slab of bluish soapstone riveted to the machine, facing the door. "Here it is." I jabbed the button inset in the stone and glanced around the gray walls, watching for a panel to start sliding open, and looking at the floor, where I felt a trapdoor might appear. Nothing happened. "Maybe there's another." "Hold it, Pop," George cut in. "Hold everything. See this copper plate on the jamb here and this strap spring on the edge of the door? They match up. I'll bet he's fixed them to break the power circuit so that the thing doesn't work unless this is closed." The lock clicked as he shut it. Blue-white glare struck down at us from a fluorescent double tube in the ceiling. "Try it now." I obeyed. Nothing in the room moved, but the floor was vibrating again. Not only the floor, the lead walls, the air they enclosed. The vibration intensified swiftly, took hold of me, every nerve, cell. Blackness smashed into the cubicle. Something jarred. That's the wrong word. It was as if a stratum of rock on which the house stood had grated bodily along another stratum beneath it. The dreadful tremor ended that same instant, but the blackness remained, thumbing my eyeballs. "If I were aboard ship," George said, "somewhere within it, I'd swear a depth bomb just went off under our keel." And then his breath caught, and I knew he'd recalled, as I had, the distant thuds. The far-off rumble of what had not sounded quite like thunder. "Let's get some light on the subject," he suggested evenly. "I think I've a pack of matches." As he scratched one, I was thinking of how in England, frustrated bombers would jettison their loads of death over some unalarmed countryside, and how people were sometimes buried alive for days beneath the ruins of just such isolated small houses as this. The tiny flame blossomed. Its feeble flicker brought George's set, gaunt countenance out of the darkness, wavered over Helen, straight and still, hand denting her sweatered breast. There should be a wall behind her. The match should be burning straight up, steady, In the windowless room where no one moved and not wavering in the soft and inexplicable breeze I felt stroking my cheek. This should be a lead-covered floor on which John Barrett lay sprawling in somehow pathetic and not rough-surfaced stone. I stared into the depths of dark spacey and not thinking yet, not daring to think. Small feet scampered, somewhere out there. Mumsy, a childish treble piped. Grandpa Harry. Kay ran into the dim, dancing circle of luminance, flung thin arms about her mother's waist and sobbed, "Oh, Mumsy, I've been looking and looking for you. All over." All over where? In the name of sanity, where were we? Part 6. It's a huge cave. George Carson had struck another match, and high above us, some bits of mica sparkled. "A cave," I repeated, as if by the reiteration I could make it seem reasonable. "A bomb blasted a hole and we've dropped into it, without even shaking us up, or smashing that machine." I didn't need him to point that out, and besides, Kay was here before us. Wherever here I ouch. The match arced away, went out, burned myself. I heard George blow on his fingers, and somehow the familiar act eased the hollow, empty feeling at the pit of my stomach. "Wait a second. I'll light another. Hadn't you better go easy on them?" Helen's voice was amazingly steady, coming out of the tarry sightlessness. "You've only the one book, haven't you?" "Right. But we've got to find a way out of here. And we can't do it in the dark." It wasn't dark here at first. That was Kay. She sounded like her usual self again, instead of the terrified little tyke who'd scampered to us out of the unknown, and I realized why Helen held herself so sternly under control. There was a little light coming in, from way off there. "Was there, dear?" "Tell Mother you came in the door from the kitchen and then what?" "Grandpa Harry called me but I closed it to tease him and I saw this button and pushed it. He said I could." "Mom, you heard him say I could push all the buttons and see what happened." "I certainly did, sweetheart." "You couldn't know he didn't mean this one." "So you pushed the button, and then everything started shivering, and all of a sudden the light went out." "Yeah, I went back to the door to get out, but there wasn't any door. I kept going farther and farther, and I couldn't feel the door or the wall or anything, and I called you and you didn't answer. And it was big in here, and I couldn't see anything. And there was nobody." It was the breathless way she told it, rather than what she told, that made it so graphic. The blind groping in sudden, vast darkness, the calls echoing and re-echoing, and bringing no response. The realization of aloneness. I stopped calling and stood still, and it wasn't so dark anymore. Like when you go into a movie theater, Mom, you can't see anything right at first, but pretty soon you can, you know? "Yes, Kay, I know." "What did you see?" "Well, far away there was this hole, like, where the light was coming in, and I was in this great big place, just stone all around, all empty. I was awfully scared. I wanted to run to the light, but I remembered how when I was a little kid, you used to tell me if I got lost, I should stay right where I was, and you'd come and find me, so I didn't." "But you didn't come, and it got too dark to see, and I didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden I heard people talking and this match lit up and it was you and Grandpa Harry and oh, Moms, I don't like it here." "I don't like it here either, dear." "I'm sure none of us do." "Then why don't we go back?" Helen laughed a little helplessly. I wondered how she would answer that to avoid the issue. "We want to, Kay," she said, matter of fact, "but we don't know how." She hadn't avoided it. In treating the little girl frankly, as an adult, I realized she was wiser than I should have been. Very much wiser. "Why, that's easy, Mom," Kay was saying. "You just push another button, like the elevator in our house." Out of the mouth of a baby I quoted softly. Is my face red? "How about some light, George?" His fingers pawed at my sleeve, traveled down it and thrust the packet into my hand. "Here." "Afraid you'll burn yourself again?" I tore off a match and struck it. The unsteady light was multiplied by the maze of curiously twisted rods and wire coils. George bent to bear it, at the machine's base, lifted the fragile body and put it across his shoulder. "What's the big idea?" The eyes he turned to me were sultry. "Pete's somewhere here, Pop. I'm not going back till I find him." Or the corners of his mouth twitched. He wheeled, strode away into the dark. I started to call to him, changed my mind. "All right, Helen, Buta, push the button," I snapped, backing away. Before this match burns out, you've got K to think about. You're not coming with a I'm the demon editor. Remember, on the story, your angle's Mary Barrett. Gata, there's just the one button. Mother, K, at this lab, had not heard this interchange. I can't find any other. It must work both ways. I was now well outside the distance the cubicle walls had been from the machine. Push it. Her little thumb went to the stone. Flame stung, and I flipped the match away. It doesn't work, Kay wailed. It's busted. Part 7. The fourth match showed me Helen hugging her small daughter to her. George, I called. George Carson, we need you. He emerged from the shadows, carrying Barrett as though the old man had no weight at all. The Navy's press agents pull a good line about all sailors being ace mechanics. How about fixing that elevator? He put down his burden and went to the contraption. I struck 5 more matches before he reported. I can't find anything obviously loose or out of place. If I juggle with it, regardless, I may do some irreparable damage. The light went out, and we were plunged back into darkness. You'll just have to wait here till the old devil comes to. Suppose he doesn't, I asked myself. He looked rotten. Suppose he dies on us? We will have to wait here, Helen was exclaiming. What about you? I'm going to look for my son. His footfalls started away. Come back here, you young nincompoop, I barked. Helen's in this jam because she wanted to help you. Where do you think you get off? Walking out on her. The footsteps hesitated, returned. Okay, Pop, you win. What do you want me to do? The least you can do is stay with us. What good do you think I would be if if anything happened? Silence gathered about us, except for a faint whisper of breathing. The blackness held no sound at all. No drip of seepage, no scutter of anything living. It was as though the unseen walls moved in on us, entombing us. We can't. A thin edge of hysteria had at last come into Helen's voice. We can't just stand around here in this awful dark. We'll go. Let's do something. Let's try and find some way out of this cave. Which direction? I wanted to know. Would you start looking? George had the answer. This breeze must be coming from the cave's mouth. All we have to do is walk into it. It's worth trying, isn't it? It might be, if we could be sure of finding our way back here. If we had a ball of corda. We have, Helen offered. Not a ball, but something just as good. My sweater. I can start the wool at the hem, and it will unravel as we go along. That's the ticket, George approved. That's what we'll do. So eagerly that I didn't bring up any more objections, although I could think of plenty. We used one more of our now scanty supply of matches while Helen tied the end of a thread plucked from the bottom edge of her sweater to the machine, testing it to ensure it would pull out easily. We've got to keep touching one another, I reminded them, so we don't get separated. I'll lead. George lifted Barrett to his shoulder again. We started out. We went very slowly, because I tested each step to make sure the darkness did not conceal a pitfall. Concentrating on each inch of progress, I was still aware of the deep, brooding silence. The small noises we made did not so much disturb as accentuate. No one spoke, not even Kay, except once when she complained that Helen was squeezing her hand so tightly it hurt. The cave floor sloped gradually upward, the breeze freshened, and it began to carry faint odors of the earthy smell of soil, the fresh scent of vegetation. These brought me both an easing of tension and a pulse throb of apprehension. What was waiting for us out there, where a paling of the dark promised the end of this interminable groping? There was a rustle of foliage. Almost abruptly, I was in the open. I stopped just in time. A foot ahead of me was the sharp edge of a ledge. Hold it, I whispered. I don't quite know why I whispered. It wasn't because I was afraid of being overheard. I think it was all inspired by a sense of immense height and by isolation under the vast, gold-dusted dome of velvet sky that confronted me. A little below my level, moving air sighed through a boundless black mass of the swaying roof. It dawned on me, of a forest. Helen's shoulder pressed against mine. I heard George gasp. Ooh, Kay breathed. Oh ooh, and then, it's night. Gee, how did it get to be night so fast? So fast was right. It could not be more than an hour. If it was that, since in his sun-flooded kitchen, John Barrett had said, it's only 3:30. 3:30 war time. What's more, not sun time. No one had answered Kay, but that didn't bother her. Look at the stars, Mom, she prattled on. They're so bright and near you can pick them right out of the sky. Her small hand reached out, as if to pluck one. They're all wrong. George was puzzled as something more than puzzled. Yeah, I can't spot a single constellation I know. If I had to navigate by these stars, I'd be lost. We are lost, George. Helen clutched Kay to her. We're lost in time and space. She buried her face in the little girl's hair, and I saw her shoulders tremble. As unbelievable as what she'd said was, that Helen Clark should have gone to pieces. I gaped in dismay and George Carson took an involuntary step toward her. She straightened up before he could reach her. Isn't it thrilling, Kay? She cried, with just the right note of enthusiasm. Just think what you can write the next time your English teacher asks for a composition about an interesting true experience. The child looked up. For an instant, from her expression, I was sure she'd not been deceived. But abruptly she laughed, exclaimed, "Oh, Mother, you ought to see how funny you look with just the top of your sweater left around your neck." Goodness! Helen snatched at the hems of her suit coat, pulled it together over a sheen of silk colorless in the starlight. "I sure am glad I felt reckless this morning and put on my best slip." All this eased the tension. At my suggestion, we moved back just within the cave. George put Barrett down, pillowed the white-maned head on his own rolled-up smoking jacket. Kay broke off the sweater thread, carried it to one side to tie it to a little knob of rock she spied. We found ourselves discussing our next step as matter-of-factly as if we'd missed a train or had run out of gas on the road. He wanted us to remain here while he went exploring. I overruled him. "You've got to stay here with Helen and Kay. I'm the one to do any poking around that's necessary." "Nonsense," he snorted, and Helen added her protest. "You can't either of you accomplish anything in the night. The sensible thing is for us all to stay together till sunrise. Maybe Mr. Barrett will wake up before that, and then our troubles will all be over." "How is he?" I asked. George bent to him. "Pulse seems pretty feeble," he reported, "but it's even enough, and his breathing is steady. No sign, though, that he's coming out of it." "Well, I'm thirsty," Kay complained, "and I'm getting hungry too." "You're thirsty and hungry, are you?" I rumpled her hair. "Okay, grandchild Kay, let's you and I run around the corner to the drugstore, and I'll buy you a sandwich and a chocolate malt. Or do you like vanilla better?" She giggled and subsided. "Now, George, getting back to Hush," Helen interrupted. "Listen." She'd turned to the opening, was staring out, tousled head a little to one side, lips parted. I could make out only the susurrus of the treetops, nothing else, not even the nocturnal shrill of cicadas or the peep of a bird disturbed in sleep. I thought, "Oh, there it is again." "I still don't hear anything." "I do," Kay piped. "People singing." And some shift of the breeze brought it to me, too, faintly, the merest shadow of melody that brushed some vaguely familiar chord. A long stride took George to the ledge. The music faded or welled up again. Briefly, the words were distinct. "A broken bar no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more today, a broken bar," and died again beneath the vast, dark rustle of foliage. There was no longer anything to dread in the luminous night. Where my old Kentucky home was being sung under the stars, so no matter how strange the stars might be, there could be nothing to fear. I started to say something to that effect, but was checked by the touch of Helen's fingers on my sleeve. She motioned to George. Within the cave-mouth's jagged black frame, he was silhouetted, stalwart and unmoving against those alien stars, in the grip of some strong emotion. As we watched him, some vagrant trick of the wind once more brought us the singing, at this time even more clearly than before, so clearly that we thought it was children's voices we heard in the rollicking, roguishly gay song to which they'd shifted. A broken bar. Think the world is made for fun and frolic, and so do I. And so do I. Some think it well to be all melancholic, to pine and sigh, but I spend my time in singing. George groaned. Even in the pallid starlight, I could discern the torment in his face. "Pete and I used to. Did you hear that?" He broke off. "Pop, did you hear a question mark? Some happy song?" He was visibly trembling. "They did just sing that, didn't they?" "I didn't imagine it." "A happy song?" "Why yes," I replied, wondering. "Seems to me that's wrong, Buta." "Of course it's wrong. It should be joyous, but Pete's always sung it happy, and you think it may be your Peter who taught it that way to the others." Helen's hand was on his arm, impulsively. "It must be Peter." "Oh, George, he's down there, and since he's singing, he's well and happy. Maybe. I hope you're right, but I don't dare let myself. I'm climbing down there, right now. Can I go with him, Mom? Kay tugged at her mother's skirt. Can I? We're all going, honey. Come on. Hey, George had already started off. I can't carry the old man. Leave him. He flung over his shoulder. Suppose he wakes up and escapes? We'll have no way of finding out how to get back to civilization. What do you think this is? We don't have to rely on him any longer. Okay, stay here if you want to. There was nothing for me to do but follow. The ledge was only about 3 feet wide, but it was so smooth and sloped downward so gradually that there was no sense of peril. Above us rose the escarpment to whose face it clung topless. Vertical rock starkly naked of vegetation and unsubstantial seeming in the stellar glimmer. What was it? The Palisades, that high cliff along the Hudson, would be dwarfed into insignificance by this Himalayan height. Even in the Himalayas, most gigantic of Earth's ranges, this precipice would be colossal. Part 8. You've decided to stop at last, have you? So even the Iron Man gets tired. George gave no sign he'd heard me. He just stood there, shoulders hunched, blunt jaw out-thrust, peering through the leaf-flecked shadows. I shrugged, leaned my back against a tree trunk, too tired for either resentment or curiosity. Helen must be as weary as I, but she was a woman. What is it, George? What do you see? The slow downward slant of the ledge had taken us some 3 miles or more from the point below the cave where the singing had seemed to come. We'd had all that distance to retrace, guiding ourselves by occasional glimpses of the towering precipice. In contrast with that gigantic height, the trees had appeared tiny. Actually, the smallest I'd noticed before weariness had caused me to lose interest was 6 feet through, and they soared breathlessly upward for 100 feet before their boughs sprang outward to form the shimmering canopy of the woods. They grew far apart, and the spaces between them were extraordinarily free of brush for so obviously ancient a forest. We'd seemed to plod endlessly through the aisles of some De Quincey dream cathedral, vast, awesome, and unreal. I see it, Mumsy. I see what he's looking at. Kay pulled her hand from her mother's, pointed to where a reddish glow wavered briefly on the bark of some arboreal giant. It's a fire. A campfire, I betcha. George stirred, said, low-toned, you people wait here while I look that over. Be careful, Ja. He strode away, leaving Helen in mid-sentence, looking after him with an odd, almost tender expression on her face. After a minute, she turned to me. He loves his son very much, doesn't he? The huskiness in her voice was more noticeable than I'd ever heard Ida, except when once or twice she'd talked to me of her dreams for Kay. Too much to have room for Anya. Anything else in his mind? Anyone else? I suggested, dryly. Is what you meant to say? It seems so. Well, I yawned. I'm going to try and get some rest. I'd advise you and Kay to do the same. Awkwardly, I lowered myself to the ground and stretched out. What time is it, anyway? She held her wristwatch up, turned her hand to catch one of the pallid beams filtering through the whispering foliage overhead. It's oh, dear, it's stopped. I'm sure I wounded. She shook the watch, put it to her ear, looked at it again, her breath caught. Kay, I wish you would lie down, sweetheart. Her voice was strangely flat. See that pile of dried leaves over there? It looks so comfy and soft. Go lie down there. You come with me. I shall in a little while. I just want to talk to Grandpa Harry about something. Go on now. The little girl obeyed, though with evident reluctance. Helen settled down beside me. You have a watch, she murmured. Even if you are too tired to get it out, please look at it. What a question mark. Oh, all right. I dug out my Waltham from the fob pocket, which my paunch made too tight for comfort. What do you know about that? It's stopped too. What time does it say it is? 3:45. Mine says 13 of. It hasn't stopped. Neither has yours. I shoved up to a sitting posture. That's impossible. It was 3:30 when hell. I burst into a laugh. You had me dizzy for a second. It's 3:45 in the morning. Of course, you know better than that. The moon must have risen because in the flecks of light dancing across the pale oval of her face, I could clearly see how drawn it was. You know as well as I do 12 hours haven't passed since we were in the Baird's kitchen. Oh, now, it was twilight when Kay first found herself in the cave. When we arrived there, not more than 10 minutes later, it was full night. The sun doesn't set in April till well after 7. The delicate wings of her nose quivered. We might as well face it, we're living at a different rate of time than our watches are adjusted to measure. I stared blankly. A different rate of time? Sorry, Helen, I was never good at puzzles. Just what do you mean? I'm not sure myself. She spread her hands. All I know is we've done things that should have taken us 3 hours or more while our watches were marking off only about 15 minutes. And that sounds like something I once read in a book by a man named Dunn, An Experiment with Time, it was called. I didn't understand it very well, but I do remember that he showed how time must run differently in different regions of space. Poppycock, I snorted. Balderdash, I thought it was too, till I talked about it with a young man I know who teaches graduate courses in science at NYU. He told me that while Dunn's book is popularized, it's basically sound. Wes tried to explain to me how, according to the latest theories, time and space are all mixed up. Interrelated functions of one another is the phrase he used. Unless modern mathematical physics is all wrong, he told me, if you were suddenly to be translated to some other part of space, your watch would keep on measuring time as it is here, but you would be living at an entirely different rate. I must have looked awfully dumb, because he told me not to worry my head about it. It was just something mathematicians liked to play around with and had no practical application. Hold it, Helen. My skin was prickling. Let me think. I was back in the living room of that charming small house in Westchester County. I was looking at a book I'd picked at random from a shelf, and an old man's gentle murmur was in my ears. All I've done is to find a practical application of his discovery of the essential identity of space and time. No, damn it, I said aloud. I don't believe it, and abruptly chuckled. What's so funny? I just thought of the old story, Helen, about the hillbilly making his first visit to the zoo. You must have heard it 1,000 times. How he stood in front of the giraffe's cage and drawled, shucks. I don't believe it, thar ain't no such animal. Maybe I'm like that hillbilly, Buddha. I didn't finish. George Carson was coming into sight, past a gigantic bull. He was grinning from ear to ear, and beside him trotted a sturdy little boy in shorts and sneakers. Peter Carson. Part 9. He was a small-sized replica of Georgie, of the same chunky build, the same smiling gray eyes. Those eyes adored his father as by the unsteady illumination of the campfire and 2 flickering candles, he and a curly-haired small girl he'd introduced as Margie brought to the rough wooden table the food for which we discovered a ravenous appetite. Queer food for me to be enjoying. I like onions and french fries with my steaks. The rest of your vegetables are spinach as far as I'm concerned. This stuff, however, tasted fantastic, even cold. Some sort of cooked grain in a bowl, a slab of something more solid that I could not identify, some peculiarly shaped fruit. Now if I only had some coffee to wash all this down, I remarked, I'd feel like Lucullus. Try this, sir. Peter put in front of me a mug, rather skillfully carved out of wood. I sniffed the limpid liquid it contained, sipped it. It had a tangy, pleasant taste, altogether new to me. What is this? Pangisade, we call it. It comes from a tree out there. The lead gestured vaguely across the clearing. It was an open space about 2 acres in extent, near one end of which the bark-covered stakes that formed the long table's legs had been driven into the ground. Along the side of the field to my right, a narrow brook purled, and beside this 2 large, rectangular tents cast black shadows in the moonlight. A baseball diamond was marked out on the grassy expanse we faced, and beyond this, I could just make out the uprights of a basketball standard. Beside me, on the end of the backless bench where we sat in a row, sprawled a limp-limbed and much-mauled doll. I hope you have some milk for Peter, Helen was asking anxiously. He looked troubled. I'm sorry, Mrs. Clark. We that Isa. Oh, it really doesn't matter if she misses it for once. She can make up for it in the morning. There won't be any in the morning either, the boy said. We don't have any cows. Aunt Mary wanted to bring some, but Uncle John said number. He thinks that's one of the good things about Tranquilia, that there are no animals here. No animals at all? Nor birds either. He nodded as if this were the most natural thing in the world. There's just the trees and plants in the valley where the woods and that's all. The plants and the trees give us all our food, Margie put in. She was a tiny tyke, snip-nosed, most apparently full of life and the devil, but she'd waited on us with the grave courtesy of an adult, and we're finding out how to make clothes out of them, and everything else we need. I see. I knew by Helen's expression that she did not see at all. She asked the question that was troubling Hera and me. What did this Uncle John of yours mean when he said it's a good thing there are no animals here? Peter hesitated an instant before answering. He explained if there were animals we'd start killing them for food and maybe to protect ourselves from wild ones, and that would kind of teach us killing living things is sometimes alright, and after a while someone would get the idea, maybe, that it's sometimes right to kill people too, like in wars and such. George grunted. He stared at his son, his expression at once startled, puzzled and speculative. This Uncle John is John Barrett, Pete? Of course. He and Aunt Mary are the only grown-ups who have ever come here till you did. And Tranquilia, as you call this place, is a children's camp? The lad shifted from foot to foot, looking uncomfortable. I guess you might say it is, Lieutenant Carson, Margie answered for him. There's only us kids who live here. I'm asking Pete. George kept his level, almost stern gaze on the boy. All right, son. You've stalled long enough. We're fed and rested. Now I want the whole story. A muscle knotted in Peter's freckled cheek. His mouth opened, closed again. His eyes were unhappy. Excuse me. Margie came to his rescue. Kay looks awfully tired. Maybe you'd like me to take her in the girls' tent, Mrs. Clark, and show her where she's to sleep. Please do, dear. And thank you for I don't want to go to sleep, Kay pouted. I want to stay here and listen to Peter's story. I'll tell you all about it in the morning, sweetheart. Upsy daisy. Kiss me good night and off with you. Oh, come on, Kay. Margie held out a stubby-fingered, capable little hand. Wait till you see the cute washroom we've got fixed up in the back of the tent. I tell you what, I'll lend you my best pajamas and my very own bed. You mustn't do that, Margie, Helen protested. Where will you sleep? Oh, I'm not supposed to sleep tonight. You can see I'm all dressed. She indicated her halter and shorts. It's Peter's and my turn to be on watch. I understood now how George had located his son without rousing the camp. Come along, Kay. Don't be such a baby. That got the brat. As the two ran off, I heard the small hostess warn, don't make any noise and wake up the other girls. They vanished inside the farther tent, and I turned to hear George saying, Night watch, eh? So there is something in these woods to be afraid of. No, sir, there isn't really, but we can't ever make the new kids believe it. So Uncle John thought we ought to have a boy and a girl stay up every night to keep the fire burning and just be around. Peter, Helen leaned forward, a curious light in her eyes. Is it always the same two that stay up together? Why, yes, ma'am. You see, when you've been on watch, you're let off chores and school the next day and everybody's got a special job to do, like cooking or washing up or going in the woods or the fields to get things, so we'd get all mixed up if we did it any other way. School, you said. Who teaches you? Why, Uncle John, of course. And Aunt Mary, one of them's here every day, and they teach us all kinds of things, but they make us kids run things ourselves. We've got to learn how, they say, because we won't always have them to depend on. This had a startling implication. George put it into words. You mean Thesa-era arrangement is permanent? The lad's brow knitted. Permanent, Dad? Yeah, I can't answer that. You can't, Peter. That's the first time you've ever said anything like that to me. Yes, sir. The lad's eyes lifted, met the gray ones so like them. Yes, he repeated miserably. It's the first time. Yeah, I'm sorry, Dad. Yeah, we've all promised never to say anything about Tranquilia. That's why we don't write letters or anything, so we won't slip up and give it away. We promised, Peter. Bronzed hands, clasping the table's edge, flattened fingertips against the wood. You, George. Helen touched the back of one of those corded hands. He's a child, George, and I'm sure you've taught him always to keep a promise. The man swallowed, relaxed a little. Listen, son, he said more quietly. You know I would never ask you to do anything dishonorable, don't you? No, Dad, I know you wouldn't. Well then, you'll believe me when I tell you it's right for you to forget that promise and answer my questions frankly. First, where, if you know, and what is this place you call Tranquilia? Tranquilia, a new voice said, behind me. is a different world from that to which you belong. John Barrett's slow and gentle voice. It is a world where there is no hate, no strife, and God willing, shall never be a clean, new world where a new race shall live in friendship and peace forever. I turned and saw him standing there, the moonlight in his silken, silvery hair. Part 10. George Carson was on his feet, head and shoulders taller than John Barrett, but instead of the wrath I expected in his eyes, there was a question, and wild surmise. A new world, he repeated, slowly, tasting the words. Friendship, peace forever. Do you mean all that, old man? Literally? I mean exactly that, Lieutenant Carson. Helen was up too. She was trembling with excitement, not fear. Of course he does, George. I've known it ever since Peter said what he did about there being no animals here. I was afraid to let myself hope he a god. It wasn't an expletive, it was almost a prayer. I'm still afraid to let myself believe via look, I growled. I don't like to break up this love fest, but I'd like you birds to tell me how you expect to keep this Shangri-La a secret? I was beginning to understand it, or so I thought. Sooner or later, some plane's going to wing over the cliff, the country its pilot belongs to will claim it, and some other nation will dispute the claim, and if there goes your peace. Barrett's machine somehow had transported us, in no time, flat to a well, perhaps an unexplored region of Antarctica kept incongruously temperate by some whim of sun and air currents. The Earth's shrunk to a pretty small ball, you know, since the Wright brothers taught us to fly. Indeed it has, Barrett agreed. Indeed, it has, Mr. Gatlin, a ball far too small for the good of those who inhabit it. But this is not the Earth. Come again. At least not the Earth you're thinking of, he placidly continued. Tranquilia, my friend, is a planet in another space, another time, than Terra. Look you, I jabbed a forefinger at him. Helen was trying to tell me something like that a while back, and I'll say to you what I said to her. There ain't no such animal. Oh, you're wonderful. Her laugh had the very note and texture of the brook's liquid tinkle. But you're too good a newspaperman to really mean it. Seeing is believing, so they say, but what do I see here to make me believe your fairy tale? I waved an embracing arm. Grass no more different from those we rode through this afternoon than those are from the ones that grew in Westchester when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. The same moon, Thea. My jaw dropped. Say, what was in that Pangisade anyway? I can swear I see two moons. I pulled the edge of my hand across my eyes, looked again. They were still there, a reddish crescent just rising above the forest, another hanging golden and almost full above the black line of the colossal precipice. Barrett chuckled. Tranquilia has two moons, Mr. Gatlin. Hardly a matter for astonishment, since Uranus, in our own solar system, boasts 4 and Saturn 10. Microscopic needles were again pricking my skin. I moistened my lips. Okay, I'm licked. This isn't the Earth. But how in the name of reason? A question mark. Listen, unless you've a straitjacket handy, you'd better tell me how you got us here. And quick. He smiled that slow, sweet smile of his. That is not easy, to one is unacquainted with the latest physico-mathematical concepts as you've confessed yourself to be. May I suggest that we move to my classroom at the grassy knoll and make ourselves comfortable while I attempt Ida? Oh, Peter. The lad had been standing silently by through all this. I think perhaps you can be excused from watch for the rest of the night. But Uncle John! I know you haven't seen your father so long. To please me, Peter, I'll see you in the morning, Dad. He ran off. I saw George wince at that as I let myself down in the spot Barrett had indicated and leaned my back against a tree that overhung the knoll. But Helen whispered something in his ear and he smiled, stretched out on the grass. The girl settled beside him. I noticed again how like a bird alighting she did so. Barrett lowered himself and sat facing the three of us. Space, Mr. Gatlin, he began, is neither finite nor infinite. I beg your pardon. He smiled apologetically. Let me put it this way. Space is neither limited nor limitless. Already, he was beyond my depth, but George was nodding wisely, and Helen looked as if she understood. So I thought I'd better keep quiet. It curves in upon itself much as does the shell of an egg, except that the eggshell has an inside and an outside, and space has not. Is that clear? All but that last remark. I bluffed. How can anything not have an inside and an outside? Well, Since it is not important for our present purpose, suppose we forget it. Let us just think of the universe, see everything that is and the reaches between as our empty eggshell with, say, a hole at one end but otherwise unpunctured, an eggshell whose greatest circumference is approximately 1 billion light-years. Let us further assume that at the other end of our eggshell from the hole, there are 2 specks of dirt, one on the inner surface, one on the outer, separated only by the thickness of the shell. Imagine that a bacterium wishes to go from one speck to the other. It would have to go all along the shell's surface to the hole at the farther end, through the hole and all the way back to the second speck, would it not? If it couldn't go through the shell, precisely, if it could find a way to penetrate the shell, it would shorten that journey of 1 billion light-years to the infinitesimal part of a second. Barrett was triumphant, and that is all there is to it. Earth is one speck, Tranquility the other, and I am the bacterium who has invented a method of warping space to shortcut that billion-year trip. There, it wasn't so hard to understand after all, was it? I was still almost completely befuddled, but I didn't intend to admit it. It's as simple as figuring out why a gal who not so many hours ago told a man he was despicable should now be twining a strand of his hair around her forefinger. Oh, Helen snatched her hand away. I hate you. Don't blame me, honey. It must be the effect of double moonlight. If that's it, George grunted, rolling over. Blessed be the 2 moons of Tranquilia. Propping himself on his elbows, he looked fatuously down into her face. Say, Pop, did you ever notice she's slightly cross-eyed? I am not. It's just that I'm focusing on a smudge at the tip of your nose. Helen sat up. Mr. Barrett, how did you know, before you came through the first time, that you'd find yourself on another world this side of space? Suppose, she caught her breath, suppose you'd come out Tina and just empty nothingness? I should never have returned, he replied, with tranquility. There were also the possibilities of my shall I say materializing, for lack of a better word, on a blazing sun or on an uninhabitable as well as uninhabited world, or within a planet's rocky or lava-like interior. But you tried it anyway. Wouldn't you have? He asked, as though she could answer in only one way. Talk about your Columbus. Christopher at least knew that if he failed, he'd drown or starve, or die in some other comparatively comfortable and approved manner. However, in order that no one should follow me if I met with disaster, I took care to destroy all my notes on the construction of my machine, as you've called it, and instructed my wife to completely destroy it if I did not reappear within a certain short space of time. How could she? George pulled himself up. The machine wouldn't have been there for her to destroy. Barrett's eyes winked. Strangely enough, Lieutenant, it would have been. It is there now. You sent it back, George said. It is still in the cavern where I wakened to find myself alone, and guessed where you'd gone. But it is also in my home in Westchester. Bunk, I snorted. You had me on the ropes for a while, but you've got another guess coming if you think you can get me to believe anything can be 2 places at once. I'm not trying to. I had a suspicion he was covertly laughing at me. My machine is in only one place, but that place happens to be common to both worlds, just as the point where the circumferences of 2 tangent circles meet is common to both. I give up. It wasn't he that had me defeated. It was those 2 moons riding gloriously in a sky of stars that were not the stars one sees from Earth. You bet your life against the quadrillion to 1 parlay that Earth and some other planet would touch each other in that room off your kitchen. The odds were not quite as much against me as that. Tangent circles, may I remind you, or spheroids may lie within one another. I have not, as yet, collated enough data to demonstrate it mathematically. But I'm inclined to believe that Tranquilia and Terra are in some part coextensive. Lay off, I begged. Please lay off me before I start looking for paper dolls to cut out. I pressed my throbbing head. All I want to know is how soon I get back to New York. John Barrett plucked a grass blade, regarded it contemplatively. That, Mr. Gatlin, is a problem. I have been wondering whether I can permit you to return at all. Part 11. Easy, Pop. George grabbed my arm. Hold your fire. Hold nothing, I grated. If he thinks he please. Helen was clinging to me. Please calm down and let him explain. I don't seem to have a chance to do anything else, the way you're hanging on to me, but don't get the idea he's going to hypnotize me the way he has you too. I'm going back, or I'll know the reason why. Precisely what I should like to tell you, John Barrett murmured in the mild way he had. "If you will permit me." "Go on, but you'd better make it good." He did. On his second visit here, he told us that he had explored this new world and found that, while its gravity, atmosphere, temperature range, and other climatic conditions were fairly identical to those of Earth, no life existed anywhere on it that he could discover. There were only the trees and the plants, the fragrant breeze and a deep, unbroken tranquility. He had returned to a world torn by war, a world of organized killing, of shattered cities and enslaved nations, even his own beloved science prostituted to the uses of brutality. "I propose to Mary," he continued, "that we pass through and smash the machine so that we could not be followed, and live out what little time was left to us, quietly in this quiet forest." She made me see how wrong this was. She made me understand that God could not mean the gift of a new and unspoiled world for us alone. "Yes." He looked up at some sound in my throat. "Yes, I believe in him. The more I have learned of the infinite, yet ordered complexity of his universe, the more firmly convinced I have been that only he could have built it." The plan they settled on was very simple, almost Macron v. They would take to Tranquility a group of children old enough to adapt quickly to new conditions, not yet old enough to unlearn the ways of the sorry world they were leaving. "If we could have brought here all the children of Earth," he sighed, "it would have satisfied us better, but that, of course, was impossible. We decided that a dozen boys and girls were enough to be the progenitors of a new race whose religion, implanted from its very birth, will be the holiness of neighborliness, the sanctity of human life." Helen's hand had crept into George's. In the soft glow of Tranquility's moons, their faces were calm and peaceful. I recalled how dark and bitter those faces had been on the Sawmill River Road. I remembered George's despairing cry, "We're trapped. We're trapped without hope of escape." But Barrett was still talking. I think it was I who thought of how to accomplish our plan with the least danger of interference. I recalled a story a member of our local draft board had told at the village store, how they'd had to turn down because he had two children, a widower who had been most anxious to get into the army. We placed the first advertisement in the Globe the next day. "You know how it read?" "Yes," I observed dryly. "I know how it reads. It was a smart scheme. You could insist on the children you took having no one interested in them except their fathers, and since they were going into combat, you could be pretty certain of not being caught up with until the war's over." "But what's going to happen then? What about those fathers when they come back?" His face went bleak, and for a moment, there was a spark of fanatic fire in his eyes. "Some will not return. Those who do will find an empty cottage and a heap of twisted, unanalyzable metal in a lead-sheathed drum." Good Lord, man, I was appalled. "You can't do that to them." "Why not?" This was George. "When you think of the millions of fathers and mothers who have given their children to war, why is it so terrible that a dozen should give theirs to peace?" "Because you look here, you were throwing conniption fits in my office this noon because you merely suspected something phony had happened to Peter. Suppose you'd found that house in Westchester empty when we'd got there? No sign of him. No sign of the people you'd left him with. No trace of any of them, ever. How would you have felt? What difference would that make? Pete would be here, wouldn't he? He won't have to live in the world like ours is going to be when this thing's over. He won't have to face the misery that's ahead. He won't ever have to see everything he's dreamed of and hoped for and worked to help build smashed because of some megalomaniac's lust for power. Isn't that worth whatever I would have had to go through?" "You can say that because you know you won't have to go through it." "Helen, you're with me, aren't you?" Her hands twisted in her lap, and a pulse throbbed in the shadowed hollow beneath her throat. "Yeah, I'm sorry for those fathers, dreadfully sorry, but I think George is right. If you had a child, you'd understand. If you'd lain awake night after night, listening to her breathe while you stared burning-eyed into the black future, trying so hard, so desperately hard, to see one single, tiny ray of hope for her happiness. Well, maybe I'm wrong, I might be, as far as what I'd been saying went. But there was still something askew about this setup, something I couldn't put salt on its tail, couldn't get it out to the forepart of my brain. "So what?" I settled down again. "What does it all add up to?" "I seem to remember you're setting out, Mr. Barrett, to explain to me why you're wondering whether you ought to let us go back where we came from. Isn't that obvious, Mr. Gatlin?" It was, naturally, but I wanted to hear him say it. If you return, Tranquilia is no longer safe from incursion. The one man who has any inkling of the theory of my machine will never reveal it, but there are other physicists less scrupulous who can reconstruct it, once they know it has been done, and use it, knowing it's safe to do so. Yes. On the other hand, as you've demonstrated a few minutes ago, the habit of violence is so deeply ingrained in you that if you remain here, you must become a focus of infection that will impair all I hope to accomplish. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. There is one way between the horns of the dilemma. You earnestly desire to go back to Earth, do you not? What do you think? I think that you are a man of honor, Mr. Gatlin. Therefore, you shall return provided you give me your solemn promise that you will keep the existence of Tranquilia, and all you have learned about it, secret forever. Now wasn't that a proposition to put to a man who cut his eye teeth on the Ho Press, the biggest story since the Chinese invented printing, and I should promise to bury it? Suppose the answer is no, Mr. John Barrett, how are you going to keep us from walking back to that cave and pushing the button on that infernal machine of yours? I shove direct. If you want your Tranquilia to see a first-rate exhibition of violence, you'll try it. He looked up at me, soberly, but apparently unperturbed. I don't have to. You may press that button from now till the end of time, and you will still be in the cavern. That was what I wanted to know. The reason it hadn't worked before wasn't because of a power failure from the other side, or because he'd jarred something out of kilter when he fell. So there's a switch you've got to throw to reverse it, is there? Where is it? Would my stratagem work? His wife wasn't here to keep him from an absent-minded slip. There is no switch, he smiled. The machine will not operate unless it is shielded with lead, and the only material it will not bring through the space warp is lead. That is why Mary and I have never visited Tranquilia together. One of us has to remain in that lead-lined room, protected by a lead-lined costume, to bring the other back. That was that. Maybe not. What does she do? Stay in there and keep her thumb on the button till you show up? Hardly. As long as one of us is absent, the other visits the room every hour, exactly on the hour, and waits 5 minutes for a signal that can be given by moving a certain rod in a certain way. Oh, that certain was the tip-off he was on to me. We've agreed that if that signal does not come within 12 Earth hours, which is a far longer period on Tranquilia, the other will come through, and then neither of you goes back. No one goes back, he agreed, unless someone on Earth happens to come along and pushes that button. He shook his head. The first thing we shall do is destroy the machine. He rose, made a weary, almost sorrowful gesture with his hands. But all that is aside from the issue. The point is that you cannot return to Earth unless and until I give Mary our signal while you are within 3 feet of the machine. I think you know that you cannot make me give her that signal against my will. Yes. About him, standing there was the awful strength of the gently the same strength I'd recognized in Pastor Matilda Pilcroller as I'd watched him in his pulpit while the iron-jawed stormtroopers thudded down the aisle of his church. Yes, I know, I admitted defeat, that I'll stay here forever unless I give you the promise you ask, and I don't want to stay here. On my word of honor, John Barrett, I will never tell anyone how I got here, or what I've seen here, or even that there is such a place as here. Thank you. He was very still for a long moment, and I could see the tautness he'd not betrayed till now drain out of him. Then he turned to George and Helen, who'd also risen but still held hands as they stood waiting for his. And you? Will you two promise to keep the secret of Tranquilia? They hadn't spoken, either of them, since Helen had made that speech about lying awake at night. I should have heard them if they had. They didn't speak to one another now. No, George answered the old man, very firmly. We do not. To my surprise, Barrett's lined, gray countenance lit up. You wish to remain here? We wish to remain here, George replied. In Tranquilia, with our son and daughter and with each other. And with each other, Helen echoed him, her eyes shining. Part 12. I insisted on leaving at once, and John Barrett, anxious to reassure his wife that he'd recovered from his heart attack, was as eager. We started immediately, but by the time we reached the cave mouth, the snow sun of another galaxy so far from ours that the human mind cannot begin to grasp the immensity of the distance was rising. I turned and took a last look at the green sea of foliage that, from this height, was all that could be described of Tranquilia. Even the gentle breeze that had greeted us here had died down, so that the thin thread of smoke from the children's campfire rose straight upward to the pellucid sky. Somehow it symbolized the spirit of peaceful aspiration they had brought here. "Well," I said soberly, "I hope it all works out the way you think it will." "It must," Helen cried. "It has to." The two of them had come along to say goodbye to me on the borderline between their new world and the one to which I am returning. God can't be giving us a second chance just to have us fail again. Barrett had gone on into the cavern, and this gave George the chance he evidently had been waiting for. "Still time to change your mind, Pop." He put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sure we can talk the old man into letting you stay. Nothing doing. You can have your Tranquilia." I pulled away, started into that great hole hollowed out of the unimaginable cliff. I'm going back where I belong." I didn't want them to see my face at that moment. "Where I belong," I repeated. "Back to my own kind of people, the kind that can take it without running away." The light followed us in, dimming but still strong enough to show me the thread from Helen's sweater as it trailed across the rocky floor. It unaccountably had frayed during the few hours since she'd unraveled it. Or was it my eyes that made it appear so fuzzy? My eyes. Barrett's frail, white-haired frame, ahead, was just as fuzzy. Helen's heel clicks, catching up to me, were caught up and multiplied by some reflecting surface. George was on the other side of me, his footfalls thudding. Funny, I mused aloud, the kind of things come popping into the head of an old fool like me. Things that have nothing to do with what's happening at the time. Like just now I happened to think of something that happened on the old world. This was a long time ago. I guess you kids are just about old enough to remember its last days. But this was long before that. John Noel, call him John Burns, was hell and gone the most promising cub we'd ever had. But one day he gets the pink slip in the pay envelope, orders from the big boss who'd just happened to drop in for a day or two, like he used to about once a year. John don't get it. He don't get it at all, so he barges right into Pulitzer's sanctum, demanding to know why he's fired. Haven't I been turning in the best copy on your sheet?" he asked. Didn't I do a whale of a yarn just yesterday on that waterfront riot?" "You did," Pulitzer acknowledges, looking at him, the way he had, like he could see him with his blind eyes. "A humdinger of a story. And didn't we beat every other rag in town by an edition because I was right on top of it when it started?" That's it," the boss says. That's why you're being fired." John stares at him, not believing his ears. Weren't you supposed to be in the Hall of Records?" Pulitzer goes on, copying off the real estate assessment list. Sure, I was. But that's just a lousy grind anybody knows his ABCs can do. I got this hunch that maybe something was brewing over on West Street and tipped a clerk a couple of bucks to take it off my hands. "What's the matter? He get it bollocks up, a number." "No, he did a good job. The only thing is, it was your job. He did the job your editor sent you out to do." "Goodbye, my boy. I wish you luck." George's footfalls thudded along on one side of me. Helen's heels clicked on the other. Not far now, John Barrett's machine glittered in the beam of sunshine that slanted down across the gloom from some chink in the cave's front wall. And then, I rambled on, there was something Roosevelt said in a speech once. I don't remember it word for word, but it was something about how we're fighting not just for America, nor just for the United Nations, but to make a better world for all the little people of the world. I don't remember if he used just those words, the little people, and I know that if he did, he certainly wasn't thinking just about the children, but I'm thinking about all the millions of kids who are going to have to keep on living in that world because their fathers weren't lucky enough to answer John Barrett's ADA. But here he is, looking at his watch impatiently. "How about it, Barrett? How much time do I have left to say goodbye to my friends?" "Less than a minute. Watch that line on the floor, Helen," he cautioned. "George, if you're caught inside of it, you'll go with us." I stepped over the faint scratch in the rock that marked out the boundaries of the lead-sheathed room in another world. "Well, my boy, I guess this is it." "Yeah, what's the matter, son? What do you see on your arm?" Putting out his hand to grasp the one I'd extended, he'd brought his sleeve into the sunbeam. The gold stripes above its cuff flashed in the light, and he was staring down at them as if he'd never seen them before. "George, I'm saying goodbye." His fingers crushed mine, and then I was looking at Helen. "Goodbye, Helen, goodbye," she whispered. It was the tears between her lashes that the sun made brilliant. "Yeah, oh, goodbye." I wanted to wish them luck, but I was all choked up, and before I could get it out, Barrett snapped, "Move toward me, Mr. Gatlin." He was doing something to the machine. There was a thud beside me, something butted my shoulder, that infernal vibration. The blackness smashed down. I was dazzled by light, the bluish-white light of a fluorescent double tube. I was blinking at a grotesque apparition, hooded, shapeless in a cloak of some heavy-seeming material, thick gloved hand dropping from the push-button. And behind me, as I turned to look for the lead-line door from this room, was George Carson. "You win, Pop." He was trying to grin, but he was making a poor job of it. "I can't do it. I can't run out on those millions of kids who've got to keep on living on this lousy earth of ours. I'm going to finish up the assignment I'm on, and if I live through it, I'm going on to do my share in making it a better world. And I'm going to do my best to help you, darling." Helen stepped around from behind the machine. "It's going to take all of us. It's going to take every drop of will and energy and brains we've got, but we'll do it. You and I and Pop, and millions of others like us. We will, George. We will, in the end, build a bright, new world here on Earth for our child Jarina." She broke off, her eyes widening, the exaltation draining from them. "Our children," she whispered. "Oh, George." "K. Peter." A broken bar, a muscle knotted in his gaunt cheek. "Kay and Peter will be in our care." A low, musical voice came from behind me, "and in the care of him who sets different paths for each of us to follow." Mary Barrett had let the lead impregnated, heavy folds fall to her feet and had removed the goggled mask. "Paths that may be wearily long, but that all come together at last." Her frail hand clasped her husband's, and standing there like that, they seemed more ethereal than ever, more a broken bar unearthly. "If you will step out for a moment," John Barrett asked, smiling that vague, endearing smile of his. "Mr. Gatlin, Mrs. Clark, Lieutenant Carson, I should like a word with my wife." There was a light in the kitchen, and the gay curtains were blowing in at the open window. "It's still night here," Helen exclaimed, then remembered. "Of course. What time is it, George?" He looked at his watch. 9:07. "I still have time to get back to my ship by midnight." "But you..." "I'll be waiting," Helen told him. "I'll be waiting for you. You know that, don't you?" I'm sure I can get leave for another 24 hours in a week or so." "Pop," he came around to me, "I'm going to depend on you to make arrangements for The floor was vibrating, the sensation like that of a massage machine against the soles of my shoes. It ended. Barrett's keys were still in the lock, turned in my hand. The light from the kitchen struck into the lead-lined cubicle. It lay my shadow over the ungainly folds of a cloak on the floor, over a goggled hood. Except for this and John Barrett's machine, the little room was empty. I felt George and Helen press against my back, felt their breath on my cheek. A metallic clang half-deafened me. A fragment of shining metal thudded to the floor. Another. The clangor filled the little house in Westchester, and bit by bit, we watched the thing John Barrett built disintegrate under the blows of a sledgehammer wielded in a world a billion miles away. And the clangor ended, and there was nothing in that room but a heap of smashed, unreconstructible metal. "Good luck," I called into that empty room. "The best of luck for your dreams, John Barrett under the 2 moons of Tranquility. As for me, I can't dream better under the 1 moon I've been used to all my life." I had the story from my friend Gansfield, whose acquaintanceship among the great, near great and merely notorious of New York and its environs reads like a combination stone proof of the current issue of Who's Who and the 5-star edition of the Daily Tattler. We were finishing dinner at the Café Tilde Copyright des Citoyens in East 57th Street, where the fromage debris is always at the precise, perfect point of ripeness. The steamed snails, lightly sauté tilde copyright head in olive oil, as sweetly tender as the first kiss of young love, and the slippery, thirst-annihilating muir salt grateful as a wellspring in the desert. It was an evening in September, too warm for autumn and too cool for summer, the fitting ending to one of those radiant, vital, sun-swept days that New York knows in early fall, when twilight settles softly, like a lavender curtain dropped from a sky of pure dark amethyst, and blue haze trails across the distant Jersey Palisades like the blue cloak of some proud queen. Dinner had been served in the garden, where orange, red and green Chinese lanterns were half hidden among the plane trees' leaves, and thick, soft grass made a carpet as soft as any from the looms of Mosul underfoot. The subdued candlelight fell on the cloth and silver and glassware. Across the pointed yellow flames I saw the pretty blonde hair and gray eyes of Frances Field and her husband's lean, tanned face, his sleekly brushed black hair and the pencil line of his small black mustache, muted like an echo from the street outside. There came the ululating warning of a motor siren, insistent but soft and musical as an ocarina played in the middle register. Frances shivered slightly. "Cold, dear?" Gans asked. Frances answered hesitantly, "I think so." Broken bar if. "Yes, dear, if you'll hold my hand, please, I'll feel safer that way and not imagine dreadful things are slithering across the grass at me." "Right-o, Yania, oh soul of my soul's soul," agreed her husband, who speaks Arabic like a native of Dixieland, which he is. "Hang on for dear life." "Here go Essa." "We'd best be going, Ina." Field smiled. He has a most engaging smile that tends to neutralize the effects of the grim things he sometimes says. The Beni Senussi, the dark brotherhood of Berber sorcerers, hereditary magicians, snake charmers and necromancers that has existed in North Africa since before the fall of Carthage, and flourishes today despite the interdiction of the Muslim Malabs and the French and Spanish administrations. The Berbers are not Arab stock, you know. They're a distinct racial group, something like the Basques, and probably pre-Aryan. Outwardly, they're Muslimen, but that's a veneer laid on a core of folklore that has fire and serpent worship for its base. Not pleasant customers to tangle with. "I should think not. And this friend of yours, Savan, whatever his name was, how'd he get mixed up with AM?" "He wasn't any friend of mine," Field corrected. "I hardly knew the bloke to speak to, but I know all about him." "And what's a motor horn that sounds like an ocarina got to do with it?" I interrupted impolitely. "Field and I don't stand on much ceremony with each other." "Oh, that?" He drew one of the table candles to him and thrust the tip of his cigar into its cone of yellow flame. As a turban of white smoke came twisting from the cigar and swirled and spiraled round his head like ectoplasm in a spirit photograph. "That'll take a lot o' telling." "Could you stand hearing it again, Fran?" "No," she denied, and smiled at him the way most men dream some woman will someday smile at them. "It was that motor siren. It made me think of Dirk van Ijderstein, and oh, that." Her husband chuckled. "Don't let it get you down, darling. He only got what he asked for." Shoemakers ought to stick to their lasts, and young smart alecks from Long Island have no business mixing in the rites and ceremonies of the Beni Senussi. "The who?" I asked. Field lit his cigar and settled in. "Here go Essa." Dirk van Ijderstein, it seemed, had been left about everything his thrifty Dutch ancestors had accumulated since the founding of the town of Breckelen in 1646 except their good, hard common sense. Born, as the saying goes, with a silver spoon in his mouth, he grew up into a spoiled brat, believing there was nothing his money couldn't buy, and encountering no evidence to weaken that opinion between his 5th and 30th birthdays. His classmates at the swanky country day school they sent him to fawned on him for his favors, and at prep school he had top place in the stag line and first choice of the girls. He cut in when he wished, but no one ever cut in on him. His father's gift to the athletic fund got him a place on the first team. That was the year Delphi defeated Shoreham 50-0. At college, it was pretty much the same. If Dirk didn't make Phi Beta Kappa, he did make Rho Tau Epsilon, which had a lot more social significance, and to his chapter house his father gave a completely equipped indoor squash court. When several of the boys blind dated chorus girls and Dirk found that the femme he'd drawn possessed less charm and beauty than the belle his roommate had, he calmly exchanged partners, and his roommate, mindful of the loans he'd made and those he hoped to make in the future, registered no complaint. Neither did the girl. She knew which side her bread was buttered on and had the not unusual feminine desire to spread some sugar on the butter. And so, with his 30th birthday just across his shoulder, we find our little scion of Long Island aristocracy orphaned and not grieving much about Ida with very much more money than he knew what to do with. and a lifetime of complete unemployment before him. He looked 10 years younger than his age. His mouth had grown a little narrower, perhaps, but there were no lines in his forehead or about his eyes, no marks of victories or defeats. Immense boredom was pressing down on him like a cloud-loaded autumn sky. He was tired of gambling at the racetracks and casinos, weary to the point of surfeit with the long succession of little gay ladies whose business in life it was to be amusing to rich young men, and so, on what might have been called an impulse, he went to Algiers for a week. The week stretched to a fortnight, and the fortnight lengthened to a month, and still he lingered. How he came to take the villa he had no idea. But there he was with a 3-month lease upon the place, a corps of native servants and a chef de cuisine who was at least 3/4 French, rejoiced exceedingly in the name of Manfro and made P.A. Sense which was in its way as much a work of art as are the panes of the Sainte-Chapelle. At first, he was enchanted with it all. He loved the flower-fresh, airy silence of the mornings before the sun had come out hot and drowsy. He reveled in the long, sweet, quiet afternoons when overripe pomegranates lay like bleeding broken hearts upon the turf-ringed flagstones of the garden paths and sunlight poured a sort of pale, liquescent brightness over everything and took on iridescence from the mass of green leafage and brilliant hibiscus flowering riotously everywhere. But he was not a man to be content with merely contemplating beauty. Perhaps he had once had a sound mind, but a thing unused tends to deteriorate, and Dirk had never had to use his mind, so he was still a baby overtaken by manhood, and like an infant, he knew life and the world only through their impacts on his 5 senses. So the boredom which he fled caught up with him that evening early in December as he sat on the flat roof of his house and watched the sun go down like a full ball of crimson in a sea of swimming rows, while in the turquoise east a single star showed sharp and bright as newly minted silver. "Ya Sidi," came the soft, insinuating voice of Othman Nejim, his dragoman. "One waits below who craves admission to thy presence. He brings that which he hopes will amuse you." "What is it?" Dirk was slightly annoyed at the interruption of his idleness. "A clown with a trained dancing ape, or one of those infernal sand-divine Ursa." "Who?" laughed the dragoman, who had a round and jolly face, a rounder, even jollier belly and a laugh rounder, fatter and jollier than either. "Is it with such trifles I would plague your lordship? I, Othman Nejim?" "Not so, protector of the fatherless. The one who waits upon thy gracious nod is a snake master, a very prince of snake charmers, a member of the clan and tribe of the accursed Beni Senusa on whom be Allah's interdiction." He cast the imprecation perfunctorily, not as if he meant it, but because it was conventional. "Wilt deign to see him, O munificence?" "Humph, a snake charmer, eh? I've seen those Johnnies in the Kashba." "Fakes, ain't they, workin' with fangless snakes?" "Not this one, Sidi. He is of the cursed tribe whose forebears worshipped at the serpent's shrine before the prophet inverted exclamation mark who converted them to Islam. 'Tis said the snakes know their blood brethren and will not bite them. However that may be, this fellow uses only deadly serpents from far hind whose lightest kiss is sharp as the edged sword of the dark angel Israel." "Oh, all right, bring the blighter up, he may be amused." The prince of snake charmers Othman Nejim usher to the roof was old, and wizened. Beneath the twisted green turban that marked him as a Haji who had made a pilgrimage to Mecca, his face was sharp and drawn, his cheek and jawbones standing out so startlingly they seemed almost to pierce the skin. A wisp of graying beard depended from his chin, and on his upper lip a straggling line of gray mustache outlined the crooked smile that looked as if it might have been stitched on his mouth with red thread. "As-salam, Ya Sidi, the salute my lord." He touched breast and lips and forehead in a flickering, almost incredibly quick gesture. "It is thy gracious wish that I have my pet dance before the presence. Can you do tricks with AM?" Despite himself, Dirk's interest was arrested by the strolling mountebank who wore his dignity and dirt with such an air of conscious pride. "Tricks?" The old man set a pot-bellied basket on the roof tiles. "Hiya, is it not a trick to force the serpents that bear death within their mouths to do my will? Ya Sidi, what greater trick is there than to hold off the sunderer of all companionships and ender of delights by the power of the eye and flute, defender of the oppressed?" "Huh, Want me to believe you haven't had their fangs yanked out? Rahmatay Allah, the Lord's compassion. Is thy servant a pork-devouring, wine-imbibing Hindu that he travels with emasculated serpents? Ya Abu Judah, O Father of Munificence, wait until my pets, my dears, my roses from the garden of the king have danced for thee, defender of the defenseless, then say if their fangs have been drawn or no. Okay, start going, feller. I can't wait all night for you to get in the groove. The scrawny little man flopped down cross-legged on the roof tiles with all the bonelessness of a rag doll. Attend my voice, O gentle ones, come to my call, ye brides and bridesmaids, ye scented bowers of delight. He jerked the cord with which the basket lid was fastened and rapped on the wattled lip of the hamper with a knuckle. His voice dropped to a gentle, wheedling tone. Come to thy lover, thy bridegroom, O ladies from the harem of the great King Abe. Above the basket's open top something had risen like a nervous jack-in-the-box that jerked from sight almost as soon as it inhaled the outside air. Yet in the fleeting fraction of a second that it showed, Van Eiderstein had seen the glimmer of a pair of little bead-bright eyes, the outlines of a cone-shaped head and the quick flicker of a forked tongue. A chill of sudden vague, indefinite fear went rippling up his spine, beginning at the small of his back and continuing until he felt the short hair on his neck commence to rise and bristle like the hackles of a startled dog. There was a chilled sensation in his forearms, and little pits of goose flesh dimpled in his skin, the age-old fear of every mammal, for the serpent had laid hold on him. Oh, hell, never mind the show tonight, old man, take your snakes and run along. I'm not feeling so good, I like to resta. Behold, Ya Sidi. The old snake charmer's eyes were on him with a cold and terrible insistence. The serpents, they come to dance before thy presence, Father of perfection. Not hurriedly, but with a dreadful, graceful, slow deliberation, flowing effortlessly as water across the smooth rim of the basket, came three cobras with the shadows of the dying day reflected in their little, flat, unchanging eyes. The serpent master thrust a scrawny hand into his dirt-encrusted burnous and drew out a small instrument that looked like an onion with half a foot of stalk left on it. Along the upper side of the stem was a line of 6 holes like flutes' tops. His eyes were fixed upon the snakes with a fierce, burning steadiness. Dirk shivered at their expression. This was not the look a trainer gives his beasts, the cold, compelling gaze of one who bids another do his will. It was the look of one who worships unclean gods as he beholds his deity, who feels himself inspired by the godhead of the being he adores, till votary and deity are one in thought and being, one in name and purpose, and thought and aim and purpose wholly evil. The music of the pipe was sweet and flute-like, fluctuating from a slender spiderweb of high-pitched melody to the soft and throaty murmur of doves busy with their courtship. It was all in minor key, the mourning, sad lament that stamps all Oriental music, yet underneath its sobbing, muted tones there was an intimation of shrill, spiteful laughter. For a long moment the three snakes swayed to and fro as if they sought to find the source of the soft, liquid-flowing notes, then slowly, lazily, their mottled bodies weaving languid andants across the umber tiles, they slid toward the old piper squatting with his back against the parapet. Dirk saw the flicker of their lightning-forked, molasses-colored tongues as they slipped out of their coiled watchfulness and crept in slowly melting zigzags toward the musician, and beneath the liquid murmurs of the flute he heard the scratching of their belly scales against the tiles, like the scuffing of dry leaves that fly before a burst of autumn wind. They formed a semicircle round the piper, swaying pointed heads from right to left, from left to right. Now one of them raised half a yard of lichen-colored body from the floor, and as it reared itself the hood behind its head expanded slowly, and Dirk saw the spectacle-shaped mark of Brahma on it. A second snake was rising slowly, and the third. Unwillingly they seemed to rise, as though drawn from the floor by some force greater than their sluggish wills, but up and up they stretched until it seemed that almost their full lengths were off the floor and that they balanced on a scant half-foot of coiled tail. Faster came the music, rising in a shrill crescendo till its piercing sharpness whipped against the ears like a despairing scream, fluttering and wavering like a cry of eldritch terror, ornamented and embroidered with arpeggios until its melody was lost completely, then once more slipping back into its mournful, sobbing tune. Their fangs, Ya Sidi, The piper took his flute from his lips for an instant. "Behold their mouths and tell me that I lied to thee." As the shrill music paused, the serpents' mouths fell open, almost as if they gasped for breath, and like grains of polished rice against the darkness of their gums Dirk saw the gleaming of their poison fangs. The old man clapped his instrument against his mouth so quickly that it seemed the echo of his last note had not had a chance to fade, blew a final piercing sweet lament. "Hyab!" he cried in a cracked, quavering voice. "The dance is ended, daughters of delight." Slowly, very slowly, like candles melting in intolerable heat, the serpents lost their rigor. They bent and swayed, lurched drunkenly, softened, wilted, and became limp and flaccid, lying upon the roof like half-deflated inner tubes, their little bead-bright eyes gone dull and lackluster. "My pets are tired," the old man said almost apologetically, and stooped to gather up his faintly quivering charges. "The dance sucks out their strength, protector of the bereaved." Dirk grinned derisively at him. "Oh, yeah? Have to be the seventh son of a sheik's seventh son before they'll dance for you, huh? Gimme that pipe, I'll show you." He had been watching the snake charmer at his work, noting how he stopped the finger holes as he blew into his pipe. Years before he'd learned to play the ocarina, and this instrument, he figured, couldn't be so very different. The old devil would come alleging that his death-defying bunk was true, would he? Pretend it took a special talent to make trained snakes dance to music? He snatched the pipe from the old charmer's hand, put it to his lips, and blew into it. A low, soft, liquid note came from the bulb at its base. He drew a quick, deep breath and blew into the instrument again, and his fingers fell upon the stops as if by instinct. Slowly, softly, came the purling notes of the old tune. "De silver moon's a shining in de heavens up above, sleep, Kentucky Babby broken bar, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim in the name of God the kind and compassionate. It is a fool's trick thou hast played, Ya Sidi." The old snake master chattered. "The snakes resent wrong charming, they will repay thee death for this insult." Already one of the spent serpents raised its head 5 inches from the roof, and as Dirk's music sounded softly through the gathering darkness, the other two twitched irritably, like sleepers woken against their will. "In Allah's glorious name I take refuge." The old man seized the slowly bending bodies of his pets close to the heads and thrust them, writhing with faint rebelliousness, into his basket. "It is an evil thing that thou hast done this night, my lord." The serpents have lost face by dancing to a stranger's piping. Their pride is very great, and surely they will make repayment for the jest that thou hast played on Thama. "Oh, get the hell out o' here, untake your trick snakes with you." Dirk reached into his trousers pocket, found a silver 2-franc piece and tossed it onto the tiles. "Anytime you'd like to have me put AM through their paces, bring AM round again." Astonishingly, the old man did not pounce upon the bouncing, clinking coin. "I cannot take it, Ya Sidi. It would be blood money." "Allah I barak Famora, God have thee in his keeping." Swinging his reed-woven basket like a fisherman who lugs a heavy catch, he shuffled to the stairwell, his heelless slippers slapping sorrowfully on the roof tiles. Dirk woke to a quick sense of apprehension. The night had been unusually sultry, and he had bidden Othman Nejim bring a mattress and silk sheet up from the house and spread them on the roof. Sleep had been a long time coming, but when it finally came, it was heavy as a drugged coma. Now it seemed an eerie dream had woken him, a dream that had to do with something heavy lying on his feet. He moved his left foot cautiously, experimentally. It felt oddly numb and stiff, as if the circulation had been stopped by some weight imposed on his ankle, and as he shifted underneath the sheet, he heard a lightly sibilating hiss, like steam escaping from a simmering kettle. In an instant, to the pre-dawn chill of dying night, there came the added iciness of mortal terror. He moved his foot another fraction of an inch, and the weight upon his ankle seemed to increase as it hardened like the sudden knotting of a tense muscle. The whispered warning hiss was sharper, more insistent. The moonlight blocked out half-tones. Objects had the stark clarity of things drawn on a blackboard, and he could see the rope-like body coiled upon his legs, rocking gently to and fro as if it swayed in a light breeze. Its hood was up, its forked tongue flickered like a flash of sable light. Its little, flat, hard eyes gleamed dully in the black head like a pair of tarnished cut steel buttons. Horror touched the very marrow of his soul. His stomach felt stiff and empty. Stark panic clawed at him, and terror seemed to drain his will. His blood seethed, churning in his ears, and every hurrying, frantic pulse beat struck his brain like a trip hammer blow. The strokes seemed to arrange themselves in rhythmic sequence, to form words chattered in a gleeful, high-pitched voice. The snakes resent wrong, charming Yasity. They will repay thee death for thy insult to them. Could it be the cobra had come back to take revenge for his silly prank? That, as the old man warned, no one not of the guild of snake charmers might make the serpents dance to his piping and live to boast of it. It had seemed fantastica, even childish, when the old snake master mouthed his admonition, but now a broken bar. He took the corners of the heavy silk sheet in his hands and raised them gently. Slowly, if he could make a shield of the tough fabric, let the snake drive into a broken bar. With a mad, convulsive twist, he drew his feet up, raised the silken rug for a screen, and rolled sidewise as a streak of black lightning whipped at his throat. The scream that stabbed the morning silence was stark terror made articulate. It rose and rose until it seemed no human throat could stand the strain of it. Then, with a bubbling, choking sob, it stopped abruptly. There was no question of the cause of death. The little punctures in the neck just where the jugular comes near the surface were diagnostic of snake bite, and the report of Dr. Charles Auguste Renouard, the police surgeon who performed the autopsy, left no room for quibbling. The toxin had spread with lightning-like rapidity, for it had struck directly into the external jugular. It was undoubtedly that of the Indian cobra, Naja tripudians, as the advanced state of deterioration of the central nervous system and the hemolytic condition of the blood attested. Non-medical phases of the case are recorded in the voluminous PRA copyright Sissovidian Hercule Jean-Baptiste Duval, Brigadier de Police, who had charge of the investigation. With a corps of native gendarmes, he had made a thoroughgoing search of house and garden. No place where any snake, even of the greatest smallness, could find lodgment had been overlooked. There was no trace of any sort or kind of serpent in the house or grounds, nor even any hole where one the size of an earthworm could find a lair which they had not investigated with the most painstaking care. Non-emphatiquement, he, Etienne Hercule Jean-Baptiste Duval, Brigadier de Police, would personally certify to that. Vraiment, how came the serpent on the housetop, and whither had it vanished when it had killed Monsieur L'M copyright stricken to death? Then, why put such abstruse questions to him? After all, he was but a simple policeman and not La Bondia. But I don't like women. I feel the same way, was my reply. Now, when it comes to men or books, why, that is something different. We were in the Turkish bath and just beginning the sweat. Only two of us in the room, on steamer chairs, with the temperature at 170, but feeling more like 200. The other man had evidently been in for some time before I entered, for his appearance indicated that he was beginning to suffer. At least he had surely reached the point of irritation. I thought this cutaneous irritability might be the reason for his outburst against the fair sex. At least there was no other obvious reason. To make his antipathy toward women in general all the stronger, he repeated the idea with variations. I just don't like them. They do things differently, they think differently. I can't even say that I believe they think, perhaps they just react to their emotions. Why, I have seen women calmly do things that a man wouldn't think of. Fond of books? He asked, abruptly changing the subject. You bet, I replied enthusiastically. Ought to be. I collect and bind them as an avocation. I make some money by binding and spend it collecting. Make a specialty of early Pennsylvania imprints. I have some really nice books. He sighed as he said it. A few of them are distinctly rare. Odd. I'm a binder myself. Must get out of here now. I can stand just so much, and then the heat worries me. He walked out, a rather portly, middle-aged man. 10 minutes later, I followed him. An hour later, I caught up with him in the sunlit patio. He was exposing his back to the lamps. I looked at that back, sat down quietly on the cot next to his, continuing to look, incredulous. At last, I was satisfied that what I saw on his skin was indeed real and not an illusion. Then I made myself comfortable on my cot and began to ponder this thing. I had never seen anything like it. Not once, in all the thousands and hundreds of thousands of men I had examined in the army, had I ever seen a back approaching the like of that one. Of course, It was something that could not be discussed. It is certainly nothing one man could ask about directly, but if he offered to talk of it freely, of his own accord, it would certainly be interesting. After the alcohol rub, I invited him to have a snack or refreshment. Wrapped in sheets, we became better acquainted over a Swiss sandwich and a cup of coffee. We found that, being bookbinders, we had much in common. He was an older man than I by perhaps 20 years. And when I told him that I had bound an erotica in the skin of a diamondback rattler for a customer, he acknowledged it to be both a new and unique idea. And rather appropriate, he added, because it would not have been erotica without having a woman in it for villain, and if a woman is not a rattlesnake, I'd have you tell me just what she is. I agreed with him, at least I let him think I did. His almost violent dislike of women intrigued me, and I wanted his explanation of why he felt as he did. But more than that, I wanted the story I was sure was connected with his back. So I sat there, expounding broadly on all the strange behavior of women which I had observed in my medical practice, called them traitors, cited history to prove them scheming, devious and cruel. Although while I was talking thus, I was glad I was in the bathhouse instead of my own home, where my wife might hear me. Of course, she would have known I was just egging him on, but she never did like it if I gave my opinion of her sisters. It all ended with his inviting me to visit him the next time I was in Boston. The address he gave was in the Back Bay section. I told him I expected to visit the city soon, and he replied that the sooner the better. Pleased he would be, and added with a sly wink, "Do you suppose you could bring some rattlesnake skins?" 3 weeks later, I sat in his library. It was an aristocrat's room done in natural burled walnut panels between wide and well-filled glass enclosed bookcases, which were built into the wall. The ceiling was of the same wood, carved in squares and supported by rough-hewn beams. 2 large windows looked out across Boylston Street to the beautiful public gardens, which were colorful with fall foliage. At one end of the room was a great fireplace of Ridgestone granite, flanked on either side by deep, restful leather-upholstered chairs. Before this fireplace was a table set for supper. "I thought you might enjoy a quiet evening here," my host remarked. "Besides, Ling, my Chinese boy, is a fine cook." I like the Chinese for many reasons, but chief of all possible reasons is the fact that they, as a nation as well as individuals, despise women. The supper served by the quiet Chinese boy was excellent indeed, the wine of exquisite bouquet and the tobacco smooth and mild. By the time supper was over, we were rather mellow and confidential. I ventured to recall his great obsession by remarking, quite casually, "Neither do I like women." "Are you married?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted, with a wry twist to my lips to prevent the smile I could hardly resist. "Too bad, you ought to really know about them. They certainly outdo themselves to make a fool of a man." I was in love on Sia just once, thought Ua, but the woman nearly killed me. After that lesson, no more women. He was becoming vocally reminiscent. "Is your wife sadistic? Has she ever tried to kill you?" "Not yet. Of course, she has told me several times what she thinks of me and men in general. But one can never be too sure of the female of the species, you know." "Better be careful. She may poison you someday," he warned. "Gracious." "I hope not." "So do I. But be on your guard. I'm naturally suspicious of all these she-devils. And that's why I'm alive today. I and the other poor trusting fellows dead." "Some of them died?" "Yes, 25 of them. Some of them my best friends. Of course, there were a few I was not acquainted with really well, but all were nice boys." "Was it during the war?" "Spies?" I queried. I wanted to get him started on that story of his back, and was sure he would tell it if it were properly led up to. It was a war, a sure enough war, but terribly one-sided. Men have no show when a woman, especially an unscrupulous Onia, gets after them. Women are clever, I admitted. This one was, and beautiful, just about as wonderful a female as the devil ever made. Genesis states that she was made by another deity. Wrong, he cried. Man, perhaps, was made in the garden, but the woman was made below and crawled over the fence in the dark of the moon. Poor Adam. If he had only had enough sense to hit her on the head with a big stone, and continued the race with some form of parthenogenesis, what a beautiful world it would have been. Let's toast these brave men who have, for all these centuries, fought so valiantly against so wily a foe, I suggested. We drained our glasses. "Now tell me the story," I urged. It was some 40 years ago when it started, he began. You were probably in high school at the time. Some of us in the trade thought of organizing an international association of bookbinders. There were 26 of us, all wealthy, young, and enthusiastic over fine books and their covers. The world was our market and playground, where we spent countless happy hours digging in musty book piles in museums as children dig in the beach sand. We were all single, except for the wedding with our art. We held meetings once a year, each in a different country, where we presented papers, exhibited specimens, and discussed all phases of our work and the latest discoveries. 1 week in every 52, spent in good fellowship, clean, wholesome, profitable pleasure. For 4 years we carried on the meetings. Then a woman applied for membership. It was at the London meeting. She came well introduced. It seemed impossible to justify a denial of the privilege for her to attend the meetings of the society. As a founder of the organization, I was able to prevent her from being elected to membership, even though some of the younger fellows thought I was wrong. They argued that so long as she was a bookbinder, she should be permitted to join. There was nothing in the laws to prevent a woman from becoming a member. I tried to amend the bylaws, but I was outvoted. So there she was, a member. She turned up in Paris the next year with a lengthy paper all ready to read. I guess she knew how to bind a book. In fact, I was much later to know that she knew how. But some of the statements made in the paper were all but, if not wholly, impossible, and proved her to be a rank amateur. She was not the person to belong to our group of specialists. In the open discussion following the reading of her paper, we told her so. Man after man rose and explained to her exactly how much in error she was on this point and that. She waited till we were through with our criticisms, and then she said emphatically that she knew she was right because she owned an Encyclopedia Britannica, 26 volumes of it, and every statement she had made was in those 26 books that we could discover for ourselves, if we would only trouble to do so. We laughed at the idea that a person could learn to bind a book, especially a fine, rare Onia, by reading the Britannica. Finally, we became silly about it and passed from simple laughter to masculine hee-hawing, and lastly, we were sarcastic. She sat stiffly, first flushed and then dead white. At last, rising, she said she would see us later on, and walked unsteadily from the room. Some of the men realized then they had behaved harshly and most unmannerly to a beautiful and earnest woman and tried to make amends. The next meeting was in Chicago. She failed to attend. 10 of our younger members likewise were absent. Just 16 of us were present. We were disturbed, in a way, for always the response had been unanimous, and now so many were absent without any explanation. The following year, in San Francisco, there were only 6 of us, and we were frankly astonished, and discussed the possibility of disbanding. But I pleaded for unity and a continuance for another year, at least. Not one of the old crowd appeared at the meeting in my home in Boston. Not one. I decided they were all either married, dead, or fed up on the idea of an international association, or perhaps they were too busy. But why not some word from some of them, especially those whom I had called friend? My host paused long enough to replenish the glasses, and I found I had been sitting rigidly, intent, as the story flowed from his lips. I was worried, he resumed, and decided to spend a few months and a bit of money seeking some of them out and try to discover the reason of the breaking up of our group. Investigation showed they had all followed the same pattern of behavior. All had done the same thing. One by one they had gone to Spain, and there all trace of them vanished. It all seemed very queer. I was all the more mystified when I returned to Boston and found a letter, in a feminine hand, from Spain. It was an invitation from the Lady Leonora Sonata to visit her. The reasons she gave were not too clear, merely that she was lonely and was desirous of my advice regarding some difficulty in her work. Would I please come if expenses and other financial matters were attended to? Perhaps I was tired and distressed anyway. My mind was not working very fast. However, at last I identified her. She was the bookbinder who had read such a foolish paper at the Paris meeting. But Spain? Spain? Why, all the rest of the boys had gone to Spain, and now I was being invited there. Why? And where were the other 25? Spain. However, I went, with my fingers crossed and knowing I was doing something foolish, I went to Spain. Not until I met her in her castle did I realize why I had gone. Once I saw her, I knew. I was in love with her, realized I had been in love with her from the first time I had seen her. Oh, of course I was a fool, but I was younger then. And she was exquisitely beautiful and dainty as an elf. She entertained me delightfully. She sang like a lark and knew how to bedevil a man. We were very much alone. There seemed to be no servants. They must have been extraordinarily well trained, for surely there must have been some serving folk, but I never remember seeing any. From the first day after I drove my car into the courtyard of her castle to the day I drove out, we were alone, and as I remarked, she was very lovely and enticing. I cannot tell you what we talked about, but it must have been all of romance, because, you see, I was in love, and I remember distinctly of telling her so. We swam in the cool, blue lagoon under the palms, both in the warm sunlight and the soft, sense-murdering light of the moon, and, lying on the white sands, her fragrant, tempting self close to me, I forgot my hatred of women. I thought no more of the mystery of the 25 book binders. All I could think of was that she was delectable and desirable, that I was young and in love. One night she was especially beautiful in a soft, misty gown which clung to her, revealingly, so that I was half mad with desire to crush her to me, never to let her go from my arms. She was particularly nice to me, even yet I can't remain calm as I remember, for she was sly and full of evil plotting, even as she accepted my caresses, and we drank deeply of that rare old Spanish wine. At just what point I fell asleep, I don't, of course, know, but when I woke, I realized I had been drugged. My head was nearly splitting with pain, and I found myself, face downward, spread-eagled, tied hand and foot to the four corners of one of her huge Spanish beds. And she sat there beside the bed, waiting for me to waken, still in that transparent gown, intensifying her ravishing beauty, awaiting for me to waken so that she might further torment me and talk to me. I didn't say anything, but I did a lot of thinking, especially about those other 25 book binders. It did not take her long to tell the story. It seems that after the Paris meeting she had become dissatisfied with her Britannique and not with the pages, but the bindings, which she decided to change. So, one at a time, she had invited the members of the association to visit her, those men who had laughed at her. One at a time, she had driven them insane with her beauty, and while I well knew her ability, and one at a time, she had drugged them and tied them, as she had me. Then on their backs she had tattooed, in purple ink, the words, Encyclopedia Britannica Volume I, or 2, 3, or 10, as the case may be. Careful lest she damage the skin, she removed the derma as a pelt from an animal, tanned it, and bound her volume as a one-man's skin for each binding. And I was to serve as leather for the last one, volume 26. Shivering, I laughed hollowly at my host. I had suspected all the time, and now I knew that he was either insane or the greatest liar of all time. But the thing is impossible, I cried. You cannot take enough skin off a man's back to bind a Britannica without killing him. Who said she didn't kill them? He retorted savagely. Of course she killed Thelma and buried them. I saw the graveyard with a name on the marker at the head of each grave. Perhaps you do not believe me? It is all true. She told me about it and then started to work on me. You saw my back in the bathhouse. She finished the title part of the last job. Do you want to see it in good light? No, thanks. I hastened to disavow any desire for further investigation and was ashamed of my suspicions. I saw your back. The words Encyclopedia Britannica Volume 26 are there in purple ink and properly spaced, so if you were skinned, it would serve for a binding. But you know it really did not happen, and not the way you tell it. Such things don't occur these days. I'll show you the books, he exclaimed, and flung open a bookcase. There they are. I rose to examine all the titles in purple ink. I took one in my hand, felt its smooth leather. I agree, I never saw leather like that before. I murmured, probably not, since it is made from human skin. Well, there in that case is all that is left of 25 friends. It's a nice story, I said. A nice, gentle bedtime story, but incomplete. You say 25 of your friends died. You were prepared for the last volume, your back shows that. Yet there is volume 26, all bound like the rest. How about that? Look at it again, he urged. I picked it out and examined it carefully. "It is different," I cried incredulously. "It looks like the others, but the leather is finer, softer, of a different grain." "Certainly, it should be," he admitted, "for that last book is bound with female skin. That is all that is left of the seductive Lady Leonora Sonata." "No, you don't mean just that." She thought she was clever, but I outwitted her. She was very sure of herself. In an unguarded moment, she laid the scalpel too close to my finger, so I used it to turn the tables on her. I bound that last volume with her skin. Now I have all the society together. Gingerly, I replaced volume 26. There was a definite discomfort in the pit of my stomach. "And that is why you hate women with the vengeance you do?" I asked. "That's why." He laughed coldly, so coldly that I shook his with an ague. "Whenever I feel there is a woman becoming interested in me, I come in here and look at my Encyclopedia Britannica and deluxe bindings." The night Seven Sisters was born, a squincowl hollered outside the cabin from the sundown until the moment of her birth. Then it stopped its quavering cry. Everything stopped. Heed the whippoorwills in the lobelia, the katydids in the fig tree beside the well, even the tree frogs, burring their promise of rain as sheet lightning flickered across the black sky. The row of slave cabins behind the old place looked ramshackled and deserted. It had been deserted, for a fact, ever since Grant took Richmond. Daylight or moon would have shown their shingle roofs fallen in and their sagging porches overgrown with jimson weed and honeysuckle. Only one cabin was livable now and inhabited. Doty, grandson of a Saunders slave, had wandered back to the old place, with a wife and a flock of emaciated children. They had not thrived on odd job fare in the city, so Doty had come home. The first year of the Depression, serenely certain of his welcome, he knew Cap'n Jim and Miss Addie would give them a cabin with a truck garden, in return for whatever sporadic labor was needed on the old run-down plantation smack on the Alabama-Georgia line. That was in 6 years ago. Miss Addie was dead now and buried in the family cemetery on the South Hill. Most of the land had been sold to meet taxes. Miss Addie's grandson, Cap'n Jim, alone was left. Cap'n Jim was a baby doctor in Chattanooga. He kept the old place closed up except for weekend trips down with his wife and 2 young sons. The red clay fields lay fallow and uncultivated, the rail fences had fallen, and even the white columned place itself was leaky and in need of paint. Whenever Doty or Mattie Sue thought of it, they had one of the young'uns sweep the leaves and chicken sign from the bare sanded clay of the front yard. But aside from that weekly chore, they had the deserted plantation all to themselves, and lived accordingly. The children grew fat and sassy on yams and chitterlings. Doty drank more homebrew and slept all day in the barrel-slat hammock. And Mattie Sue cooked, quarreled, and bore another child every year, a broken bar. That is, until Seven Sisters was born. That night, a squincowl hollered, and somewhere beyond the state highway, a dog howled 3 times. More than that, one of the martins, nesting in the gourd pole in front of the cabin, got into the house and beat its brains out against the walls before anyone could set it free. 3 signs. Small wonder that at sundown, Mattie Sue was writhing in agony of premature childbirth. Not even the 2 grease taxes, which Reese and Corabelli, her oldest unmarried daughters, aged 15 and 17, had placed under her bed to cut the pain, did any good. "Oh, loss ya mammy done took bad," Reese whimpered. She hovered over the fat, groaning black woman on the bed, eyes wide and frightened in her pretty face. Reese had seen many of her brothers and sisters come into the world, but always before, Mattie Sue had borne as easily and naturally as a cat do. "My savior," Clarabelle whispered, "we got to get somebody to midwife her. And Fauna Broken Bar go long and fotch her, quick." "Oh, loss ya Broken Bar," she wailed, holding high the kerosene lamp and peering down at the woman in pain. "Yeah, Broken Bar's sho skeered. What you waitin' on, fool? Run." "A Broken Bar, oh, lawsy, mammy, a Broken Bar, mammy." Reese plunged out into the night. The slap-slap of her bare feet trailed into silence. The cabin's front room was very still, save for the regular moaning of Doty's wife and an occasional snore from Doty himself, drunk and asleep on the kitchen floor. There was no sound within. The other children were clustered in one corner, silent as young foxes. Only the whites of their eyes were visible against the dark. Clarabelle tiptoed about in her mail-order print dress, her chemically straightened hair rolled up on curlers for the church social tomorrow. Light from the sooty lamp threw stunted shadows. The reek of kerosene and the smell of bodies blended with the pungent odor of peaches hung to dry in a string beside the window. Hot summer scents drifted in, sun-baked earth, guano from the garden, the cloying perfume of a clematis vine running along the porch rafters. It was all so familiar, the smells, the night sounds, the broken and mended furniture, discarded by 4 generations of Saunderses, the pictures tacked on the plank walls of a snow zine, of a Spanish dancer, of the Presidente torn from old magazines Cap'n Jim and Miss Ruth had cast aside, the last year's feed store calendar, dated January 1934, the gilded, rain-marred wreath, saved from Miss Addie's funeral, now decorating the mantel with its purple and gilt ribbon. Read, Abid HMF. Even the childbirth scene was familiar to all of Maddie's children except the youngest. And he ate a broken bar. There was an eerie quality about the night, throwing the familiar out of focus. The young uns felt it, huddled, supperless, in the corner while Clarabelle fluttered ineffectually about the bed and its burden. It was so hot and oppressive, with a curious air of waiting. Even a rumble of thunder along the horizon sounded hushed and furtive, and the screech owl's cry drifted nearer. The woman on the bed writhed and moaned again. Clarabelle twisted her black hands together, bright with pink nail polish, a relic of the winters spent in Chattanooga as a nurse for Cap'n Jim's youngest. She went to the open door for a 4th time, listening for the sound of approaching footsteps. Aunt Fan had a cabin down the road about half a mile, and had washed for the Andrews as far back as anyone remembered. She was a church woman, in fact. One of her 3 husbands had been a preacher before he knifed a man and got sent away to prison. If anyone could help Mattie Sue in her extremity, it would be Aunt Fauna Broken Bar. The squincal wailed again. Clarabelle drew a quick circle on the cabin floor and spat in it, but the moaning of her mother went on, incoherent, rising and falling as though in imitation of the owl's ill-omened call. Clarabelle stiffened, listening. The hurried crunch of shod feet came to her ears at last. With a gasp of relief she ran out to meet the Parisi, returning, and a tiny weazened old woman with a wen in the center of her forehead, jutting out like a blunt horn. Aunt Fan, what I tell you? Listen yonder, Reese whimpered. Dado lay squincal been Holland fit to be tied ever since sundown. The old midwife poised on the porch step, head cocked. She grunted and, with a slow, precise gesture, took off her apron to don it again, wrong side out. Dat ought to fix him. What, Mattie Sue, my land o' Goshen. Dat young un don't belong to get born for 2 months yet. She been workin' in the garden? Well, my broken bar. Clarabelle started to lie, then nodded, contrite. Seemed like she did do a little weedin' yesterday, a broken bar. So dat's hit. I done tole her, dat low down triflin' doty. Aunt Fan, with a snort that included all men, switched into the cabin. Outside, the screech owl chuckled mockingly, as though it possessed a deeper knowledge of the mystery of birth and death. Reese and Clarabelle hunched together on the front stoop. Through the door, they could hear Aunt Fan's sharp voice ordering the children out of her way into the kitchen. Mattie Sue's regular moaning had risen in timbre to a shrill cry. Clarabelle, squatting on the log step of the porch, whispered under her breath, Reese muttered. Ain't no use prayin' wid Dado lay squincal haulin' his full head off. Oh, lawsy, Clary, you reckon Aunt Fan can a broken bar? The older girl shivered but did not reply. Her eyes, wide and shining from the window's glow, swept across the flat terrain. Fireflies twinkled in the scrub pines beyond the cornfield. A muffled roar from above caught her ear once. She raised her head. Wing lights on a transport plane, racing the storm from Birmingham to Atlanta, winked down at her, then vanished in the clouds. 11:30, she murmured. Less hits late tonight, a broken bar, daggone. If an Dado lay fool don't shut up his screech in a broken bar. She checked herself, sheepishly fearful of her own blasphemy. Of course, there was nothing to all that stuff her mammy and Aunt Fan had passed down to them, huddling before the fire on rainy nights. Signs, omens, judge a broken bar. Cap'n Jim had laughed and told them, often enough, that a broken bar. The girl started violently. From the cabin, a scream shattered the night, high-pitched, final, Then everything was still. The tree frogs, the quarreling katydids, the whippoorwills, the muttering thunder, a trick of the wind even carried away the sound of the transport plane, and the screech owl stopped hollering, like an evil spirit swallowed up by the darkness. A few minutes later, Aunt Fan came to the door, a tiny bundle in her arms, swaddled in an old dress of Mattie's. The girls leaped to their feet, wordless, eager, but the old woman in the doorway did not speak. She was murmuring something under her breath that sounded like a prayer or an incantation. There was a sinister poise to her tiny form framed in the lighted doorway, silent, staring out into the night. Suddenly, she spoke. "Clary honey, a broken bar risi. You mammy done dade. Won't nothing I could do, boot to broken bar my soul to glory. Hitch something funny about dis gal baby, she white as cotton. I reckon yo mammy musta had a sin on she soul. How come de law'd taken her?" Clarabelle gasped a warning. A broad hulk had blotted out the lamplight behind Aunt Fanadoti. Awake, still drunk, and mean, a tall sepia man, wearing only his overalls, he swayed against the door for support, glowering down at the bundle in Aunt Fan's arms. "Woods colt," Dodie growled. "I ain't gwine feed no woods colt to broken bar get hit on out'n my cabin. I got 8 young'uns o' my own to feed. Workin' myself down to a frazzly broken bar get hit on out. I done tole you," he snarled, aiming a side swipe at Aunt Fan that would have knocked her sprawling if it had landed. But the old woman ducked nimbly, hopped out onto the porch, and glared back at Dodie. Her tiny black eyes glittered with anger and outrage, more for herself than for the squirming handful of life in her embrace. "You Dodie Saunders," Aunt Fan shrilled, "you big low-down triflin' piece o' trash. I gwine tell Cap'n Jim on you. Jes' wait and see, don't I tell him, throwin' Mattie's own baby out'n de house like she won't nothin' but a mess o' corn shucks. And Mattie layin' dead in yonder broken bar." Dodie swayed, blary-eyed, trying to separate the speaker from her alcoholic image. "Dade? Mattie Sue a broken bar, my Mattie Sue done dade? Oh, lost ya when you tell me broken bar?" His blunt, brutal features crumpled all at once. Childlike in grief, he whirled back into the cabin toward the quilt-covered bed. "Mattie?" The three on the porch heard his voice. "Mattie, honey?" "Hit's your Dodie, say something. Honey, a broken bar don't sull up like that and be mad at Dodie." "What I done now?" "A broken bar, Mattie, a broken bar?" Clarabelle and Risi clung together, weeping. Only Aunt Fan was dry-eyed and practical. In the dark, she looked down at the mewling newborn baby, and slowly her eyes widened. With a gesture almost of repugnance, the old woman held the infant at arm's length, peering at it in the pale glow from the open cabin door. "My Lord a mercy," she whispered. "No wonder Mattie Sue died a birth in Dissy one. Makes no difference if it hits a woods colt or not. Dissy chilly broken bar." She stopped, staring now at Clarabelle and Risi. They paused in their grieving, caught by Aunt Fan's queer tone. The old woman was mumbling under her breath, counting on her black fingers, nodding. "Dado lace quin cow," Risi sobbed. "I knowed it. If'n hit hadn't a hollered, Mammy woldn't a broken bar. Squin cow don't mean nothin' tonight." Aunt Fan cut in with an odd intensity. Law, hit's just stomped down noshil dat a squin cow'd come around to holler at dis he birth in, nor neither hit wouldn't do no good to put no axes under Mattie's bed, nor do no pran. You know why? Dis he young un got 6 sisters, ain't she? Dat make she a 7th sister. She gwine have de power." Like a solemn period to her words, a clap of thunder boomed in the west, scattering 10-pin echoes all over the sky. "Yes-sir-e, a 7th sister," Aunt Fan repeated, rubbing the wen on her wrinkled forehead for good luck. "You all gwine have trouble wid dis chili. Hit's up your pity she didn't die alongside she mammy." Risi and Clarabelle, saucer-eyed, peered at their motherless newborn sister, at her tiny puckered face that resembled nothing so much as a small monkey. But she was white, abnormally white, paler than any light-skinned child they had ever seen, paler even than a white baby. Her little eyes were a translucent watery pink, her faint fuzz of hair was like cotton. "De Lord help us to get right," Clarabelle whispered in awe. "What us gwine do wid her? Pappy won't leave her stay here, not no woods colt, and sho not no 7th sister. Will you keep care of her, Aunt Fan? Anyways, till after de funeral?" The old woman shook her head, with flat emphasis. She thrust the wailing bundle into Reese's arms and stomped down the porch step. "Nasa, honey, not me. Hit say in the good book not to have no truck with no conjuro mon, and dat little sister of ourn gwine be a plain out, hard down conjuro mon, show as you born. A broken barges keep her out in the corn crib. Dodie won't take no notice of her, feed her on goat's milk a broken bar and Fan shook her head in wonder. She show is a funny color." It was a month after Maddie's funeral before Cap'n Jim came down to the old place again with the boys and Miss Ruth. When he heard, by neighborhood grapevine, that Dodie's new baby was being hidden out in the corn crib like an infant Moses, he stormed down to the cabin with proper indignation. He took one startled look at the baby, white as a slug that has spent its life in darkness under a rock. Pink eyes blinked up at him painfully. The little thing seemed to be thriving very well on goat's milk, but the corn crib was drafty and full of rats. Cap'n Jim attacked Dodie with the good-natured tyranny of all deep Southerners toward the workers who trust and depend upon them. "I'm ashamed of you, boy. Dodie was over 10 years older than Dr. Saunders, making your own baby sleep out in a corn crib, just for some damned fool notion that she's a hoodoo. And of course, she is your own baby. She's just an albino, that's why she's so white." Dodie bobbed and scratched his woolly head. "Yes, Cap'n. Sure enough, yes, it's a lack of pigment in the skin. A broken bar." Dr. Saunders floundered, faced by the childlike bewilderment in the big man's face. "I mean, she's black, but her skin is white." "Shay broken bar. Oh, the devil. You take that child into your cabin and treat her right, or I'll turn you out so quick it'll make your head swim." "Pass." Dodie grinned and bobbed again, turning his frayed straw hat around and around by the brim. "Yes, Cap'n Broken Bar, you ain't got a quarter you don't need, is you? Seem like we's plumb out o' salt and stuff. Ain't got no nails, neither, to mend a chicken house." Dr. Saunders grunted and handed him 50 cents. "Here, but if you spend it on bay rum and get drunk this weekend, I'll tan your hide." "No sub." Dodie beamed, and guffawed his admiration of the bossman's unerring shot. "I ain't gwine do dat, Cap." "Does you want me for anything? Jes ring de bell. I'll send Clarabelle on up to look after de boys." Dodie shambled off, grinning. Cap'n Jim let out a baffled sigh. He strode back toward the place, well aware that Dodie would be drunk on dimes toward bay rum by nightfall, and that the big rusty plantation bell in the yard would clang in vain if he wanted any chores performed. But he had laid the law down about the new baby, and that order at least would be obeyed. "A pure albino," he told his wife later, at supper. "Poor little mite, it's amazing how healthy she is on that treatment. They won't even give her a name. They just call her Seven Sisters a Broken Bar and cross their fool fingers every time she looks at 'em. I'll have to say, myself, she is weird looking with that paper white hair and skin." "Oh, well, if they'll get used to hear a broken bar." Cap'n Jim laughed, shrugged, and helped himself to some more watermelon pickle. Dodie, with his 50 cents, rode Mula back to the nearest town 5 miles away. In a fatherly moment, while buying his bay rum at the 5 and 10, he bought a nickel's worth of peppermints for the young uns. He bought salt, soda, and some nails. Plodding back home up the highway, he passed Aunt Fan's cabin and hailed her with due solemnity. "Us sure got a seven sister, all right," he called over the sagging wire gate, after a moment of chit-chat. "Cap'n Jim say she ain't no woods colt. He say she black, but she got pygmies in de skin. What make her look so bright-colored? Do, my savior. I bet she got de blue gum. I sho ain't gwine let her chaw on my finger like dem other young uns when she teethin'. I ain't fixin' to get pizened, praise de Lord." Aunt Fan answered non-committally, rocking and fanning herself on the front stoop. "Reckon what all she gwine be up to when she old enough to be noticin'? Woo-ee, make my blood run cold to study 'bout it." Dodie shivered, clutching his store purchases as though their prosaic touch could protect him from his own thoughts. If there was any way to get rid of the baby, without violency a broken bar, but Cap'n Jim had said his say, and there was nothing for him to do but raise her along with the others. It was a fearful cross to bear, for Seven Sisters began to show signs of the power at an early age. She could touch warts and they would disappear, if not at once, at least within a few weeks. She would cry, and almost every time, a bull bat would fly out of the dusk, to go circling and screeching about the cabin's fieldstone chimney. Then there was the time when she was 3, playing quietly in the cabin shade, her dead white skin and hair in freakish contrast with those of her black brothers and sisters. The other children were nearby but not too near, keeping the eye on her demanded by Clarabelle without actually playing with her. Willie T, 5, was playing train with a row of bricks tied on a string. Booger and Gaino, twins of 8, were fishing for jackworms, poking a blade of grass down each hole and jerking up the tiny dragon-like insects. Lula and Willie and Buzz, aged 12, 9, and 13, were engaged in a game of squat tag under the fig trees. They were not paying much attention to their queer-colored youngest sister, though from time to time she glanced at them wistfully. Willie T was the one who happened to look up and see the bird clumsily winging along overhead in the clear June sky. He pointed, not greatly interested. "Look at Dadule Shipoke." Snatching up his stick, he aimed it at the flapping target, closed one eye, and shouted, "Bang, bang, babloom." In imitation of Captain Jim's rifle, the bird flew on. The other children glanced up idly. Only the little albino, lonesome and longing for attention, feigned interest in this spy play. Squinting eagerly up at the distant bird, she pointed the old chicken foot with which she was playing, and trebled in mimicry of her brother, "Bang, bang, boom." And a weird, incredible thing happened. The Shipoke, flapping along, wavered suddenly, one wing drooping. With a lurching, fluttering motion, it veered then fell like a plummet, striking the ground not 3 yards from where the little girl sat. Willie T stared. The bird was dead. There was blood on its feathers. In a stunned, silent, wide-eyed group, Maddie's other children backed away from their ghostly sister. She blinked at them, her pinkish eyes squinting painfully in the sunlight. "Bang bang," 7 sisters repeated in a hopeful undertone. There was a shuffle of running feet. Her lower lip quivered when she saw that she had been left alone. She was always alone after that, partly because the other children shunned her, and partly because she could not see well enough to run after them. She had developed a peculiar squint, holding her towhead to one side, slit-eyed, upper lip drawn back to show her oddly pointed little teeth. For a 7th sister, she tripped over things and hurt herself twice as often as her brothers and sisters who were not gifted with supernatural powers. Captain Jim, on a flying visit to the plantation one Sunday, had noticed the way the child always kept to the shadowy places. "Weak eyes," he pronounced. "Typical of albinos." "Have to get her some special glasses," he sighed, mentally adding up his vanishing bank account. "Oh, well, a time enough when she starts school, though. Lord help the little thing at recess." That preference for shadow was given another connotation by dark-skinned observers. "Duh, ain't I done tole you?" Aunt Fan was triumphant. "Siege like a cat in the dark, but can't see hardly nothing in the daytime." "Yes sir, is she a plain out, hard down conjuro mon, and I knowed hit the first time I sot eyes on her." By this time, the lone screech owl that had attracted 7 sisters' birth had become 7 screech owls, hovering in a ring around the cabin to demand Maddie's soul in return for the new baby's power. This power mystified 7 sisters, though she did not doubt that she had it. Clarabelle and Dodie had told her so, ever since she could understand words. Now, a thin too quiet child of 6, she accepted the fact as simply and sadly as one might accept having been born with an interesting clubfoot. But, because it was the only way in which she could attract attention, a half-fear, half-respect of the little albino drew on her imagination, and did not herself know where fact ended and fancy began. The other children jeered at her but were frankly envious. The elders laughed and remarked that nobody but ignorant country folk believed in conjures anymore. Secretly they came to her by night, and hissed at her window, and proffered silver in return for her magic. 7 sisters never saw any of the money, however, as the business was always transacted through Clarabelle or Dodie. Some of the things they wanted were incomprehensible to her at first. Mojessa tiny bags of cloth that might contain anything at all, plus the one thing only she possessed, the power. In Atlanta, in Birmingham, and Memphis, especially in Harlem, a good one might sell for as much as $10. These, according to whatever words the conjurer mumbled over them, were able to perform all sorts of miracles for the wearer, from restoring the affection of a bored mate to ensuring luck in the numbers game. 7 sisters, with the precocity of all outcasts, caught the idea early. Like the little girls who started the witch scare in Salem, she felt pains and saw apparitions for the bug-eyed approval of Keenan neighbors. She made up words and mumbled them on every occasion, squinting weirdly and impressively. She hummed tuneless little chants in an eerie rhythm. She memorized the better-known household conjures, such as burying 3 hairs from the end of a hound's tail under the front steps to keep him from straying. With ready wit, she invented new ones, then forgot them and supplied others on call. True, most of these tricks had, at one time or another, been subtly suggested by Aunt Fan or Clarabelle as the proper procedure for a seven-sister. But the little albino, pleased and excited by any substitute for affection, threw herself into the part of a pale, wistful Shirley Temple in the role of Cybele. She wanted to be admired, however. She did not want to be feared. But even Clarabelle, who loved her in the skittish way one might grow to love a pet snake, gave her a wide berth after the incident of the stomach ache. It happened one sultry August day when Dodie came stumbling into the cabin, drunker than usual and in a nasty mood. "Wha dat low-down triflin' sister?" he bellowed. "Wha she at? I'm gwine where to hide offen her back a talkin' dat 4-bit piece from a layman Wilson for a huntin' mojo, hidin' it from her po' ole pappy what feed her. Wha she at? Young nun, you come out from under dat table, I sees you." The other children, gnawing pork chop bones beside the fireplace thanks to the sale of a health mojo purported to contain the infallible John the Conqueror Rata, stirred uneasily. In this mood Dodie was apt to throw things at anyone within range, but it appeared that Seven Sisters, quaking under the table, was the main object of his wrath tonight. "Come on out, you hear me?" Dodie snarled, grabbing up a stick of light wood from the hearth and advancing toward the culprit. "I'm gwine whup you good. Stealin' my 4-beat a broken bar. Ya broken bar done lost it, pap ya broken bar." Seven Sisters' childish treble was drowned out by his bellow of rage. "Don't whup me, I drapped it in the field. I couldn't see where I drapped it. I'll go get a broken bar." "Now you's lyin' to me," Dodie roared, waving his club. "Come on out. I'll learn you." The other children, fascinated, stopped gnawing their chop bones for an instant to watch, their greasy black faces gleaming in the firelight. Dodie jerked the table aside. Seven Sisters cringed. Then, "Don't you hit me with no stick," the frightened child shrilled. "I'll put a hoodoo on you." "I'll a broken bar." Dodie lunged, and fell over the table. His stick whistled dangerously close to the child's towhead. The next moment Dodie was groaning with pain, doubled over, hugging his stomach. Sweat stood out on his black face. He stared at his weirdly white daughter, backed away, thick lips trembling. Seven Sisters made a dive through the open door and out into the friendly night. Captain Jim happened to be at the place that day. It was a Sunday. He rushed Dodie to the nearest city in his car. "Appendicitis," Captain Jim called it, to the man at the hospital. He and Miss Ruth had a good laugh over Dodie's version of the attack. But after that, Clarabelle stopped giving her little albino sister a playful spank when she was naughty. No one would touch her, even in fun. "I done tole you," Aunt Fan intoned. "Do, Moses, puttin' a hoodoo on she own pappy, dat ole Seven Sister. She's born to trouble." She bad. For more than a week thereafter, Seven Sisters hid in the woods, creeping out only to sneak food from the kitchen. She was deeply frightened. So frightened that when Captain Jim came to bring Dodie back from the hospital, she ran from him like a wild creature. If she had not tripped over a log and knocked the breath from her slight body, he would never have caught her. Dr. Saunders helped her up and held her gently by the shoulders, marveling anew at her features and cotton-white hair and skin. Her single garment, a faded dress which had not been changed for 8 days, hung half off one shoulder, torn and filthy. She was trembling all over, squinting up at him with white-lashed pinkish eyes dilated by terror. Now, child," the tall bossman was saying, in a tone as gentle as the grip of his hands. "What have those fools been telling you? That it's your fault about Dodie's appendix? Well, heaven help us." He threw back his head, laughing, but stopped when he saw how it frightened his small captive. "Why, don't be scared. Captain Jim won't hurt you. Look here, I've got a present for you. Don't let the other young uns get hold of it, you hear? Just hide it and play with it all by yourself, because it's yours." The little albino stopped trembling. Gingerly, she took the proffered box and gaped at the treasure inside. A doll baby a foot high, with real hair, red hair, and eyes that opened and shut. When she turned it over, it gave a thin cry. "Mama!" Seven sisters giggled. The captain chuckled. "Oh, I don't reckon you want this old doll baby." He made a pretense of taking it back, eyes twinkling. The child clutched at it. "You do? Well, then, what do you say?" Seven sisters ducked her head shyly. "I don't care," she whispered a polite rural South for thank you. Dr. Saunders chuckled again. "That's a good girl." He stood up, gave her a careless pat. Then he strode off toward the place, frowning over his own problems, and not the least of which was mother-in-law trouble. He and Ruth, along with their two boys, had been so happy in their touch-and-go way. Then his wife's mother, a forthright lady from Oklahoma, had descended upon them and decided to run their lives with a new efficiency. With her customary dispatch, she had found a buyer for the old Saunders plantation and was now raging at her slipshod son-in-law's reluctance to sell. Even Captain Jim had to admit that the price was half again as much as the property was worth. Besides, his practice in Chattanooga had been dwindling of late. A mother-in-law could point out such matters so vividly. A broken bar. Seven sisters blinked after he retreated. Keeping to the shade of the pine coppice, she followed the tall white man a little way, the doll squeezed tightly against her soiled blue gingham dress. Captain Jim waved at someone, who met him in the orchard, a pretty red-headed woman. They went on to the house together, arms about each other's waists. Seven sisters watched them until they were out of sight. Thereafter she listened attentively whenever Dodie or Clary spoke of the cap. She grew to love anyone that he loved, and to hate anyone that he hated, with a dog-like loyalty. In her child's mind, good became personified as Dr. Saunders, and evil as either the sheriff or old Miss Beecher. It was common knowledge about the mother-in-law trouble. Clarabelle, who cooked all year round for the Saunderses now, had passed along every word of the quarrel. "Us'll get turned out like white trash if'n de cap'n sell de place," Dodie mourned. "Dat told Miss Beecher, do, law, dat-o lay-o mon mean as a cottonmouth. She don't care what happened to us folk, nor nobody. Miss Ruth sho don't take after her none. I wished she'd fall down de steps and bust her brains out, so she wouldn't plague de cap'n no more. If'n he don't sell come Thursday, Thanksgiving, she gwines make his life missable." Seven sisters listened, huddled apart from her black kin in a shadowy corner of the cabin. Her little heart began to beat rapidly as a mad idea crept into her head. Without a sound, she slipped out into the frosty night of mid-November. There was a thing Aunt Fan had hinted to her one day, or rather, to Clarabelle within her hearing, since no one ever spoke directly to a seven-sister in idle conversation. Something about a broken bar graven image. There was even, Aunt Fan said, a passage about it in the good book, warning all Christians to steer clear of the matter. But Seven Sisters was not a Christian. She had never been baptized in the creek like the rest of Dodie's brood. Nothing hindered the plan, and it sounded remarkably simple. "Whatever you does to the image, you does to the one who names it." Aunt Fan's solemn words came back to her clearly. "Jes wrop somethin' around it what dey wears next to dey skin don't make no never mind what hit is. And dat's the conjure." "Eh? Law, I see the conjure man do dat when I was married up wid my first husband. And the man he conjure drap dade as a doornail dat same winter broken bar, and dey do say as how hit were a big black cat got in de room wha dey was setting up wid de corporation. Hit jump up on the bed and go to yowlin' like a lay Satan hisself. Yes siree, dat's the Lord's truth like I'm tellin' you." Seven Sisters, picking her way easily through the dark, slipped into the pine coppice. After a moment, heart pounding, she dug up something from under a pile of leaves. A faint sound issued from it, causing her to start violently. "Mama!" Like a small white ghost, the child then ran through the peach orchard. The place, dark now since Captain Jim had gone back to Chattanooga, loomed just ahead. Seven Sisters found what she was looking for, under the steps of the isolated kitchen, an old piece of silk nightgown that she had seen Miss Ruth's mother herself give Clarabelle as a polishing rag for the flat silver. The older girl had used it and flung it under the kitchen steps. Seven Sisters retrieved it now furtively and padded swiftly back through the orchard. Deep in the pine coppice, lighted only by the filtered light of a quarter moon, she sat down cross-legged. For a long time, she stared at the lovely thing Captain Jim had given her, the only thing that had ever been truly her own. The hair was so soft, the glass eyes so friendly. But now the doll had taken on a new personality, a hated one. Seven Sisters glared at it, shivering a little. Then, deftly, she tied the silk rag about its china neck, and stood up. "Olé Ms. Beecher, use olé Ms. Beecher," she hissed with careful emphasis, then clarified, against all mistake, to whatever dark-pointed ears might be listening, "Miss Ruth's mama, Cap'n Jim's wife's mama, that's who you is, doll, you hear me? Olé Ms. Beecher." Broken bar. With a fierce motion she banged the poppet hard against a tree trunk. The china head broke off and rolled at her bare feet. "Mama!" wailed the headless body, accusingly. Seven Sisters dropped it as though it were red hot. She backed away, rubbing her hands on her dress like an infant Lady Macbeth, and shuddering in the Indian summer chill. Panting, shaken, she turned and ran back to the cabin, but she paused in the half-open door. Excited activity was going on inside, and Fan was there, puffing with importance and fumbling for her box of snuff. Dodie was shouting questions, wringing his big hands. Clarabelle, Reese, and the others were milling about like a flock of chickens, clucking and squawking in chorus. "A broken bar and a phone call say for you to clean up the family lot on the South Hill," and Fan made herself heard shrilly. "She gwine be buried from the place like Missity a broken bar." "Oh, lawsy, ain't it awful?" This from Reese. "Sho is, honey," and Fan agreed complacently. "I don't reckon the Cap'n LL ever be the same. Hit was so awful. I don't reckon he care what become of the place, nor nothin'. He so cut up about hit." "Lord help us," Dodie shouted for a fifth time. "When it happened, how come?" "I done tole you," Aunt Fan repeated, relishing the drama of her words. "Truck run slap into M. She was plumb flaying out in the car. Cap'n won't even scratched up, but it broke her poor neck." The child in the doorway caught her breath sharply. The conjure had worked. So soon? A little knot of nausea gathered in her stomach, in memory of the china head rolling against her bare foot. Then an angry thought came. "Aunt Fauna Cap mayn't gwine bury Dado Leo Mon in the family lot, is he?" Seven Sisters piped above the chatter. "Not Dado Lay Ms. Beecher." Broken bar. The excited group barely glanced at her, impatient with the interruption. "Ms. Beecher?" Aunt Fan grunted. "Law, chilly. Hit ain't Olay Ms. Beecher what got killed. Hit was Miss Rue." The broken bar. The elderly woman continued with her narrative, dwelling on the details with relish. "A broken bar and a man tole Marse Joe Andrews over de foamy a broken bar law he say to Cap'n j set da by she bed and hold she hand, don't cry nor nothin', j set da and stare, like he dayed, to a broken bar." Seven Sisters heard no more. A sound like falling timber roared in her ears. Through it, dimly, she thought she heard a screech owl's quavering cry, eerie, mocking, malicious. She turned and ran, blindly sobbing. Cap'n Jim's Miss Ruth. She had forgotten Miss Ruth's hair was red, exactly like the doll's. And a broken bar. That soiled bit of nightgown might not have been a lay Miss Beecher's at all, but Miss Ruth's. Cap'n Jim's Miss Ruth. A broken bar. Beyond the cornfield, the black woods opened up to receive the small ghostly figure, running like an animal in pain, running nowhere, anywhere, into the chill autumn night. Sawbriars tore dark scratches in her dead white skin, but Seven Sisters did not feel them. She ran, careening into tree trunks and fighting through scuppernong vines, until the salt taste of blood came into her mouth. Twice she fell and lay in the damp leaves for a long time, her thin shoulders racked with sobs. "Oh, Cap'n Jim, a broken bar, I didn't go to do it," she whimpered aloud once. "I didn't mean to. I didn't hones I didn't a broken bar." At that moment, she heard the dogs baying. Tense as a fox, she sat up and listened. Was it only old man Wilson, hunting with his pack along the North Ridge? Or was it a broken bar, the law, a posse, with guns, following the deputy sheriff and his two flop-eared bloodhounds through the cane brake? Following a trail of small bare feet, the little albino sprang up, her flat features contorted with panic. Harrowing yarns crowded her memory, of the time Aunt Fan's preacher husband had hidden a canebrake for 8 days, with the dogs baying closer and closer, and Aunt Fan's husband had only cut a man with his razor, while she broken bar. Just then, she heard the screech owl, right over her head. Seven Sisters was running again, goaded now by the spurs of terror, but now the very woods seemed hostile. Gnarled branches snatched at her cottony hair and tore a jagged flap in her gingham dress. Old spider webs clung to her face. The dogs sounded nearer. Once more, she tripped and fell, panting, but sprang up again with a scream as something slithered out from beneath her arm. The screech owl tittered again, from somewhere above her. It seemed to be trailing the ghostly little fugitive, so white against the ground. Seven sisters ran on, blindly, staggering with exhaustion. Once she cried out in her terror oddly, the very name of the one she was running from. Capma Broken Bar. Capjima Broken Bar. All of a sudden, the ground dropped from beneath her feet. She pitched forward and felt herself falling into space. Dark icy water rushed up out of nowhere to meet and engulf Hira Broken Bar. Mist rose from the cornfield in front of Dodie's cabin. Dry leaves rattled. The gourds on the marten pole swung in the wind. Somewhere a screech owl quavered again, far away, in the direction of the creek, whose muddy waters had washed away the sins of many.